Between 1720 and 1751, Londoners were knocking back an astonishing 7 million gallons of gin every year, the equivalent of 2 pints weekly for every man, woman and child in the city. The streets were filled with addiction, poverty and death, but for those who made and sold this deadly spirit, business was booming. Here's what life was really like in the gin-crazed Georgian era. So yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment below. Last week someone from Canada said they listened during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. Okay, tonight it's the Georgian gin craze. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes crack open in the darkness. The smell hits you first. A mix of human waste, rotting food, and something sour you can't quite place. Welcome to London 1735. You're Elizabeth Bowman, and that wet spot on your thin straw mattress is probably from the leaking roof above your rented room. Christ alive, my head, you mutter, your tongue feeling like it's been wrapped in wool. That's what happens when you drink gin until you can't stand anymore. But who could blame you? Your throat still burns from yesterday's batch. Dawn barely filters through the grimy window. The single room you rent for 6 shillings a week is tiny, about the size of a modern bathroom. A cracked chamber pot sits in the corner, already half full from the night before. You'll empty it out the window later, like everyone else. You roll onto your side, every muscle protesting. Unlike your comfortable bed right now, this lumpy mattress might as well be filled with rocks. No wonder your back always hurts, but you can't lie in, not when there's gin to make. See, that's your business. The whole of London is in the grip of the gin craze, and you're one of thousands of small-time gin makers trying to cash in. It's the only way you've found to survive since your husband died of smallpox 3 years ago, leaving you with nothing but debts. I should explain something about gin in 1730s London. It's nothing like the artisanal stuff you might sip on a Friday night. You're probably thinking, but gin's made from juniper berries, right? Well, technically yes, but here's the fun part. You haven't seen a real juniper berry in months. My secret ingredient? You'd tell your customers with a wink. Pure English ingenuity. That's a nice way of saying you flavour your homemade spirit with turpentine to get that piney taste. When juniper's too expensive, you do what you have to do. And you're far from the only one. Most gin sellers are doing the same, adding everything from sulfuric acid to lime oil to give their product some kick. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, wincing as your bare feet touch the cold, damp floorboards. Your single room is on the 3rd floor of a crumbling tenement in St Giles, one of London's most notorious slums. The building groans around you, packed with families and individuals, all trying to scrape by. Through the thin walls you can hear your neighbour Mrs Cooper already coughing up her lungs. Consumption, probably. She won't last the winter. You make a mental note to check on her later. Maybe bring her a nip of the good stuff, the batch you actually made with real juniper. Just need to get moving, you tell yourself, rubbing your temples. Getting dressed is simple enough. You sleep in most of your clothes anyway. It's too cold not to. You pull on a threadbare dress, once blue but now an indeterminate grey from years of wear and infrequent washing. The smell of your own body is something you've grown used to. In a city of 700,000 people crammed together without proper sewage, everyone stinks. Your fingers instinctively check for the small knife you keep in your pocket. A woman alone needs protection, especially in your line of work. The streets of Georgian London aren't kind to anyone, but they're particularly harsh for women trying to make their own way. Elizabeth, you awake in there? A pounding on your door makes you jump. Coming, Jack, you call back, recognizing the voice of your supplier. You open the door to find Jack Ran, a wiry man with a perpetual grin despite his missing front teeth. He's younger than you by nearly a decade, but already one of the more successful spirit smugglers in the area. He didn't get the nickname 16-string Jack for nothing. The man is known for his flashy clothes, each leg of his breeches tied with 8 silver strings. "Got your delivery," he whispers, pushing past you into the room. From under his coat, he produces a large jug of raw spirit, fresh from the still this morning. Careful, it'll burn the hairs off a dog. You take the jug, testing its weight. "How much?" "2 shillings. "Same as always," Jack says, his eyes darting around your room. "Though prices might go up soon. The magistrates are cracking down again." That's the thing about Georgian London. The authorities are constantly at war with gin sellers. One year they relax the laws to please the landowners who grow the grain. The next they're hanging people for selling gin without a license. "You heard about Judith Dufour?" Jack asks, lowering his voice. You nod grimly. Everyone in the gin trade has heard the story. A woman so desperate for gin money that she took her 2-year-old from the workhouse, strangled it, and sold its new clothes for gin money. She was hanged at Tyburn last year. The story made you sick, but it also scared you. Not because you'd ever do something so horrible, but because it showed how easily the authorities would make an example of women in the gin trade. "Well, they're using that to push for new laws," Jack continues. "Bishop Wilson's on a crusade, says we're creating a drunken, ungovernable set of people. Like they weren't ungovernable before gin," you mutter, handing over the coins. Jack pockets the money with a flourish. "Just be careful where you sell today. The constables are out in force around Covent Garden." After he leaves, you look at the jug with a mix of dread and anticipation. This raw spirit is the base of your business, but it's dangerous stuff, sometimes containing up to 80% alcohol. People have gone blind from badly made batches. You grab a smaller jug and carefully pour some of the clear liquid into it. Now comes the part that requires skill, turning this raw spirit into something people will pay good money for. From a small wooden box under your bed, you pull out your supplies, a small bottle of oil of turpentine for that juniper flavour, a bit of alum for bitterness, some lime oil for zest, and if you're feeling particularly bold, a tiny amount of sulfuric acid, what the trade calls oil of vitriol, to restore. The smell makes your eyes water as you mix your concoction, but you've been doing this long enough that you know exactly how much of each ingredient to add. Too much turpentine and customers get sick immediately. Too much vitriol and they might not wake up at all. "Perfect," you mutter, taking a small sip to test your work. The liquid burns down your throat, but the flavour is right. Strong enough to make people forget their troubles, flavoured enough to disguise the raw alcohol. You pour your creation into several small bottles, easy to hide in your pockets and under your skirts. The gin tax of 1736 made it illegal to sell gin without a $50 licence, an impossible sum for someone like you. So like thousands of others, you've gone underground. The clock strikes 6 and you know it's time to head out. The early morning is when workers are looking for something to warm them before a day of hard labour. The gin you sell isn't just a luxury. For many, it's breakfast, lunch and dinner. You tuck the bottles carefully into various hidden pockets in your clothes. If a constable searches you, you'll claim their medicine. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Outside, London is already awake and roaring. The narrow streets of St Giles teem with humanity. Children with dirty faces running barefoot through puddles that might be water or might be something worse. Costermongers pushing carts full of dubious vegetables. Apprentices hurrying to their masters' shops. And everywhere, the signs of the gin epidemic. A man passed out in the gutter, snoring in his own filth. A woman with a baby at her breast, her eyes vacant as she sips from a small bottle. Children with the pinched, hungry looks of those whose parents spend food money on spirits. You turn away from these sights. You've learned to harden your heart. It's not your fault that life is so miserable that people will do anything for a few hours of oblivion. Your first stop is always the same, a small bakery where the workers start before dawn. The heat from the ovens hits you as you slip in through the back door. "Morning, Elizabeth," the head baker nods at you, already sweating in the oppressive heat. "The usual?" You slip him a bottle and he passes you a halfpenny and a small loaf of bread. It's still warm and your stomach growls at the smell. You haven't eaten since yesterday noon. "Any trouble with the constables?" you ask, breaking off a piece of the bread. The baker shrugs. "They were around yesterday, but they're easy enough to pay off. It's the informers you need to worry about." He's right. The 1736 Gin Act offered a $5 reward to anyone who informed on illegal gin sellers. It turned neighbour against neighbour, created a network of spies and liars who'd say anything for that kind of money. "I know how to spot an informer," you say with more confidence than you feel. By mid-morning, you've sold half your bottles and your pockets jingle with coins. It's not much, a few pennies and halfpennies, but it's enough to live on, more than you'd make as a washerwoman or a street sweeper, the usual jobs available to women of your class. You make your way toward Covent Garden despite Jack's warning. The market there is always busy, and busy means customers. The trick is to be subtle, to know who to approach and who to avoid. The garden square is crowded, as usual. Fruit and vegetable sellers shout their wares. Ladies in fine dresses pick their way through the crowd, servants trailing behind them. And in the shadows of the pillared market building, people like you conduct business in whispers and nods. "Gin?" you murmur to a haggard-looking woman balancing a basket of laundry on her hip. Her eyes light up. "How much?" "Penny a glass," you say, "or tuppence for a larger one." Money changes hands, and you pour a measure of gin into a small cup you carry for the purpose. The woman drinks it in one gulp, closes her eyes for a moment, then hands the cup back. "Another," she says, already digging for more coins. You're about to pour when a hand clamps down on your shoulder. Your heart stops. "What have we here?" a gruff voice asks. "Selling Geneva without a license, are we?" You turn to face a red-faced constable, his grip tightening on your shoulder. Behind him stands a smirking man you recognize from around the neighborhood, an informer, clearly. "It's medicine, sir," you stammer, "for my cough." "Save it," the constable growls. "You'll have a chance to explain yourself to the magistrate." The woman with the laundry has already melted into the crowd. No witnesses to help you. That's how it goes in the gin trade. Every seller for themselves. As the constable starts to drag you away, panic rises in your throat. A conviction could mean months in a house of correction, hard labour breaking rocks or picking oakum until your fingers bleed. You've heard the stories. Women who went in healthy and came out broken, if they came out at all. In desperation, you reach into your pocket, not for your knife, but for your purse. "Perhaps we could come to an arrangement," you suggest quietly, pressing a few coins into the constable's hand. He hesitates, then looks around to make sure no one is watching. "This once," he mutters, pocketing the money, "but I see you around here again. It's the house of correction for you." You nod gratefully and back away, heart still pounding. That was too close. You've lost a day's earnings to the bribe, but at least you're still free. As you make your way back to St. Giles, the city seems more oppressive than ever. The gin trade has made London a place of contradictions, incredible wealth alongside desperate poverty, moral crusaders fighting against desperate people just trying to escape their misery for a few hours. The sun is setting by the time you reach your lodgings, casting long shadows between the buildings. You climb the creaking stairs, exhausted and hungry, but grateful to have avoided disaster. In your tiny room, you collapse onto your bed, the straw mattress rustling beneath you. The remaining bottles of gin are lined up on your windowsill, catching the last light of day. Tomorrow, you'll try again, in a different area with different customers. That's life in the gin-crazed Georgian era, a constant dance between making enough to survive and avoiding the authorities who would see you imprisoned for the crime of trying to live. Your fingers play with a loose thread on your dress as you stare at the ceiling, wondering how long you can keep this up. A shout from the street draws you to the window. Below, a crowd has gathered around a man who's collapsed in the gutter, foam at his lips. Bad gin, probably. The kind cut with too much vitriol or worse. You've seen it before, and you'll see it again. At least mine won't kill them, you whisper to yourself. It's the small comfort you cling to in this world where survival means walking a moral tightrope every day. As darkness falls completely, you reach for one of your own bottles. Just a small sip to help you sleep. In the morning, you'll start again, mixing your concoctions, hiding from constables, selling oblivion penny by penny to those as desperate as yourself. This is your London, this is the gin craze, and like the city itself, it will consume you if you let it. The next morning arrives with the sound of church bells and shouting in the street below. You're already awake though. Sleep never comes easy when your stomach's empty and your room feels like an icebox. Another day in the life of Elizabeth Bowman, gin seller of St Giles. Your near miss with the constable yesterday means you need to be more careful, maybe try a different approach. The gin trade has gotten more dangerous since Parliament passed that damn 1736 Gin Act, but the people demanding your product haven't gone anywhere. Just need to be smarter about it, you mutter, splashing some water from your chipped basin onto your face. The water's freezing, but it helps clear your head. You've got about half a jug of raw spirit left from Jack's delivery. Not enough to make a full day's worth of sales, but enough to try something different. Today, you're thinking of setting up a Puss and Mew. What's a Puss and Mew? It's the cleverest way to sell gin that London's underground dealers have come up with yet. Picture this, a wooden wall with a small slot in it, and on the wall is a metal cat figure. Yeah, an actual cat. Customers walk up, put a coin in the slot and say, Puss. Then, from inside, the seller, that would be you, says, Mew, and pours gin through a pipe that comes out under the cat's paw or mouth. The customer catches it in a cup, downs it, and goes on their way. No face-to-face contact, no getting caught red-handed by constables. You've seen them popping up across London, and you know just the place to set one up. The abandoned tailor's shop on the corner. The owner died of fever last month, and no one's claimed it yet. But first, breakfast. You fish under your bed and pull out the heel of yesterday's bread. It's hard as a rock now, but if you dip it in water, you can just about chew it. This is what passes for breakfast for most Londoners in your position. The rich might wake up to eggs, bacon and coffee. You get stale bread if you're lucky. Could be worse, you remind yourself. Could be in the workhouse. The workhouse is every poor Londoner's nightmare, a prison in all but name where the destitute are sent to labour endlessly breaking rocks, picking oakum or grinding bones. The food is worse than what you're eating now, and the conditions make your tiny room look like a palace. You've managed to stay out so far, but it's always there, waiting for those who fall too far. You pull on your coat, the same one you've had for 5 years, patched so many times it's more patch than original cloth, and head out into the London morning. The smell hits you like a wall as soon as you open your door. London in 1735 is probably the stinkiest place on earth. No proper sewage system means waste just flows through open gutters in the streets. Add to that the smoke from thousands of coal fires, the stench of the meat markets and tanneries, and the general unwashed masses, and you've got a smell that would knock you flat if you weren't used to it. You descend the rickety stairs of your tenement, nodding to Mrs. Cooper, who's sitting on the bottom step, her breath coming in wheezing gasps. "Morning, Lizzie," she manages between coughs. "Got any of your medicine?" That's what a lot of people call gin, medicine, and to be fair, in a city where the water can kill you and the cold seeps into your bones, it does serve a kind of medicinal purpose. It dulls pain, both physical and the deeper kind that comes from living in squalor with no hope of escape. You glance around to make sure no one's watching, then pull out a small bottle. "Here," you say, pressing it into her hand. "Just a little to ease the cough." She doesn't offer to pay, and you don't ask. There's an understanding among the desperate. You help when you can, because tomorrow it might be you needing help. The streets of St. Giles are already busy, though it's barely past dawn. Children as young as 5 or 6 run errands or beg. Men trudge to whatever labour they can find, the lucky ones to regular jobs in workshops or markets, the unlucky to stand on street corners hoping someone needs a strong back for the day. You make your way to the abandoned tailor's shop, a small bundle under your arm containing the things you'll need. The place is dusty and smells of mildew, but the front window facing the street is perfect for what you have in mind. Setting up a puss and mew isn't complicated. You've brought a piece of wood to block most of the window, leaving just a slot at the bottom. From an old pewter dish, you've fashioned a crude cat face that you nail above the slot. "Meow," you practice, giggling despite yourself. Sometimes you have to find humour where you can. Inside, you set up a small table with your bottles of gin and a funnel attached to a long, thin tube that you run out to the cat's mouth. It's not pretty, but it should work. Now, all you need are customers. You don't have to wait long. A group of labourers passes by on their way to work, and one notices your setup. He nudges his friends and approaches, a penny already in his hand. "Puss?" he calls, dropping the coin through the slot. "Mew," you respond, and pour a measure of gin down your funnel. The man catches the liquid in his cupped hands. He doesn't have a cup, and slurps it up, wiping his mouth with his sleeve afterward. "Good morning, medicine," he says with a grin, revealing several missing teeth. His friends soon follow suit, and before you know it, you've made 6pence in sales. Not bad for your first hour. The morning passes quickly, with a steady stream of customers. You're careful, always checking for constables before responding to a puss with your mew. By midday, you've sold most of your stock and have a pocket full of pennies and halfpennies. You're just considering closing up and heading to the market to buy some real food for once, when you hear a commotion outside. Peering through a crack in your wooden screen, you see a crowd gathering around a well-dressed man on horseback. "Hear ye, hear ye," the man calls out, unrolling a scroll. "By order of His Majesty's government, a new proclamation regarding the sale and consumption of spirituous liquors." Your stomach drops. Another law? They're always changing the rules, always finding new ways to crack down on the gin trade while still allowing the rich to drink whatever they want. The sale of gin without proper licence is hereby punishable by imprisonment and public whipping, the man continues, and any person informing on such illegal sales shall receive a reward of £5. £5. That's more than most people in this neighbourhood see in months. It's enough to tempt even the most loyal friend to turn informer. You suddenly feel very exposed in your makeshift gin shop. The announcement continues, but you're no longer listening. You need to pack up and get out before someone decides £5 is worth more than their next drink. Hastily, you dismantle your puss and mew, stuffing the parts into your bundle. You'll have to leave the wooden screen, but that doesn't have your name on it. You're about to slip out the back when the door to the shop creaks open. Your heart nearly stops, but instead of a constable, it's Jack Rann, your supplier, looking uncharacteristically worried. "Elizabeth," he whispers urgently, "you need to come with me, now." "What's happening?" you ask, clutching your bundle to your chest. "They've arrested Molly Harris. Someone informed on her gin cellar down on Drury Lane. They're saying she's going to hang." Molly Harris. You know her. Not well, but enough to have shared a drink once or twice. She ran one of the bigger gin operations in the area, a cellar where people could come and drink on the premises, a step up from your street selling. "Hang?" you repeat, disbelieving. "For selling gin." Jack's face is grim. "For selling adulterated spirits that killed 3 men. They're saying she put too much vitriol in her mix." The blood drains from your face. You've been careful with your own concoctions, but who's to say what's too much? There are no recipes, no regulations. Everyone makes gin their own way, with whatever they can get their hands on. "Come on," Jack says, tugging at your arm. "There's a meeting. People like us. We need to figure out what to do." You follow him out the back door and through a maze of narrow alleys. Jack moves with the confidence of someone who knows every back street and hidden passage in London. It's how he stayed ahead of the law so far. He leads you to a cellar beneath a respectable-looking coffee house near Covent Garden. The contrast is striking. Upstairs, gentlemen in fine clothes debate philosophy and politics over expensive imported coffee. Down here, in the dank basement, the cellar is crowded and lit by a few sputtering candles. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. You recognise many faces, fellow gin sellers from various neighbourhoods, a few dealers in stolen goods, some women who work the streets. "Listen up," a large man with a scar running down his face calls out. You know him as Big Tom, though you've never learned his real name. He's a former soldier who now runs one of the most successful gin shops in 7 Dials. "We've got a problem. The magistrates are cracking down harder than ever. Molly Harris is facing the noose, and word is they're looking to make more examples." A murmur runs through the crowd. Making an example of someone means a public hanging at Tyburn, with crowds gathering to watch the spectacle. Hangings are like holidays in London. Shops close, people bring picnics, children are hoisted on shoulders for a better view. "What are we supposed to do?" a woman's voice calls out. "This is how we eat. How we live." "We need to be smarter," Big Tom says. "More careful about who we sell to. No more selling to strangers. And for God's sake, be careful with your mixtures. We can't have more people dying from bad gin. That's the thing about the gin trade. It's built on a foundation of desperation. The customers are desperate for escape, and the sellers are desperate for income. Quality control isn't exactly a priority." "I've heard they're changing the law again," someone else chimes in, "making licenses cheaper so more legal gin shops can open. And how's that help us?" a voice challenges. "We still can't afford a license, even if they cut the price in half." The discussion goes back and forth with various suggestions thrown out. Go underground completely, move operations to different neighbourhoods, bribe more constables, but no one has a real solution. As the meeting breaks up, you find yourself standing next to a woman you've seen around but never spoken to. She's older than you, with deep lines etched into her face and hands gnarled from hard work. "First time at one of these?" she asks, offering you a pull from a small flask. You nod, accepting the flask and taking a small sip. It's gin, but better than what you make. smoother, with a real juniper flavour. "I'm Elizabeth," you say, handing the flask back. "Anne," she replies, "been selling gin for 15 years now, started back when it was still legal for anyone to distill." "How do you stay out of trouble?" you ask, genuinely curious. 15 years is a long time to avoid the constables. Anne gives you a knowing look. "I found a better way. Come with me. I'll show you." Curious, you follow Anne out of the cellar and back into the streets. She leads you through the market at Covent Garden and down a side street to a respectable-looking house. Not fancy, but not a slum either. "This is yours?" you ask, surprised. Anne nods, a hint of pride in her expression. "Rented, but yes, all from gin money." She takes you inside, and you're immediately struck by how clean it is. There's actual furniture, a table, chairs, even a small bookshelf. This is luxury compared to your single room. "Sit," Anne gestures to a chair. "Let me explain how I stay alive in this business." You sit, still taking in the relative opulence around you. "I'm listening." Anne bustles around, lighting a small fire in the grate and putting on a kettle. The mistake most sellers make is selling to anyone with a penny. That's how you get caught. "I only sell to people I know, regular customers who come to me by word of mouth." "But how do you make enough that way?" you ask. Volume is how most sellers survive. A penny here, a penny there, all day long. Anne smiles, revealing surprisingly good teeth for someone her age. "Because I charge more. My gin is better. Real juniper, no vitriol, no turpentine, and I sell it as a luxury, not as cheap escape." She points to a row of small bottles on her shelf, each with a handwritten label. "Mrs. Anne's Cordial Water, restorative tonic for ladies, healthful spirit of juniper." You market it as medicine, you realise. "Exactly," Anne nods. "And I only sell to women, respectable women who wouldn't be seen in a dram shop but still want their daily gin. Widows, wives of tradesmen, even a few merchants' ladies. They pay 3 or 4 times what your street customers pay, and they never inform on me because they'd have to admit they're buying gin themselves." It's genius, really. Find a niche within the gin market where the customers have money and a reason to keep quiet. "How did you start?" you ask, as Anne pours hot water into cups and adds a splash of gin to each. Anne's face darkens slightly. "Like most, out of necessity. My husband was a journeyman printer. Good man, good trade. Then the gin got him. Started drinking more and more, couldn't work. Eventually drank himself to death, leaving me with 3 children and no income." She passes you a cup. The gin-laced tea is warming and soothing. "I started selling what killed him," she continues with bitter irony. "Figured I might as well profit from the devil I knew, but I swore I'd never sell the kind of rotgut that took my James. My gin is clean as I can make it." You sip your drink thoughtfully. "Could you teach me? How to make better gin, I mean?" Anne studies you for a moment, then nods slowly. "I could use some help with deliveries. Getting older now, and my knees aren't what they used to be. You seem smart enough to learn, but you'd have to stop using turpentine and that other poison." "Agreed," you say quickly. The prospect of making a decent living without constantly looking over your shoulder for constables is too good to pass up. "First lesson," Anne says, settling into her chair. "Real gin starts with good spirit, not that raw stuff your friend Jack probably sells you. You need to redistill it, clean it up." She points to a small copper pot in the corner of the room, with tubes running from it into a bucket of water, then into a collection vessel. "That's a proper still?" you ask. You've heard of them, but never seen one up close. "Small one? Yes, technically illegal without a license, but easier to hide than those big operations in the gin cellars. I run the raw spirit through it twice before I even think about adding juniper. The concept of taking such care with gin production is foreign to you." In your world, it's all about making it as quickly and cheaply as possible, then selling it before you get caught. And the juniper, you ask? It's expensive. It is, Anne agrees, but worth it. I buy it from an apothecary I know, add it to the spirit with some coriander seed, angelica root, and a bit of dried lemon peel. Let it steep for a day, then distill again. That's proper gin. She makes it sound so simple, yet you know it represents a completely different approach to the trade, an investment in quality rather than just chasing quick pennies. Why are you telling me all this? You ask suddenly. Why help me? Anne is quiet for a moment, staring into her cup. I see myself in you, she finally says. 20 years ago, that was me, desperate, alone, doing what I had to do to survive. If someone had shown me a better way then, maybe I wouldn't have these. She holds up her hands, showing you the burn scars from years of working with hot stills and caustic ingredients. Besides, she adds with a small smile, like I said, I need help with deliveries. My customers are scattered across the better parts of town, and these old legs can't walk as far as they used to. Just as you're about to respond, there's a sharp knock at the door. Anne freezes, her eyes widening in alarm. Were you followed? She whispers. I don't think so, you reply, but uncertainty creeps into your voice. You were careful, but with Jack leading the way through unfamiliar streets, who knows? Anne motions for you to be silent and moves to a small window, peering out cautiously. Her shoulders relax. It's all right, she says. It's just Mrs. Winthrop for her weekly bottle. She opens the door to reveal a well-dressed, middle-aged woman who looks nervously up and down the street before slipping inside. Mrs. Anne, the woman says, breathless. I came as quickly as I could. Have you heard? They've arrested another gin seller. They say she'll hang. I've heard, Mrs. Winthrop, Anne says soothingly. But you needn't worry about me. I'm very careful. Mrs. Winthrop notices you for the first time and eyes you suspiciously. Who is this? My niece, Elizabeth, Anne lies smoothly. Just arrived from the country to help me with my rheumatism. Elizabeth, this is Mrs. Winthrop, one of my most valued customers. You curtsy awkwardly, trying to look like someone's country niece rather than a St. Giles gin seller. Mrs. Winthrop doesn't look entirely convinced, but is too distracted by her need for gin to press the issue. Do you have my tonic ready? My nerves have been terrible this week. Mr. Winthrop has been most difficult about household expenses. Anne retrieves a small, elegantly labelled bottle from her cabinet and hands it to Mrs. Winthrop, who in turn passes over what looks like a considerable sum of money. Remember, just a small glass in the morning and another before bed, Anne instructs, as if prescribing actual medicine. Too much will inflame rather than calm the nerves. Mrs. Winthrop nods earnestly, tucks the bottle into her muff, and with another nervous glance outside, slips back out the door. And that, Anne says after she's gone, is how it's done. She pays me $1 for that small bottle, more than you make selling to 20 labourers, I'd wager. She's right, and the revelation is both exciting and infuriating. While you've been risking your life selling penny glasses of gin cut with turpentine, Anne has built a comfortable life selling tonic to middle-class women at premium prices. It's not fair, is it? Anne says, reading your expression. The rich drink their wine and brandy without anyone batting an eye. The middling sort have their tonics and cordials, but let the poor try to forget their misery for a few hours with gin, and suddenly it's a moral crisis that requires hanging people. That's the hypocrisy of Georgian London in a nutshell. The gin craze is only a crisis when it affects the poor, who are expected to remain sober enough to work themselves to death for starvation wages. So, Anne continues, leaning forward in her chair, are you interested in learning my way? It's still risky. The law doesn't care if you're selling to labourers or merchants' wives, but it's a sight better than what you're doing now. You think about your tiny room in St. Giles, the constant fear of arrest, the grinding poverty. Then you look around Anne's modest but comfortable home, at the steady stream of respectable customers willing to pay good money for quality gin disguised as medicine. Yes, you say firmly, teach me. Anne smiles, and for the first time since your husband died, you feel a flicker of real hope. Not just for survival, but for something better, a way to navigate the perilous waters of Georgian London's gin-soaked economy without drowning. As the afternoon light begins to fade, Anne shows you her still in more detail, explaining how to clean the raw spirit, how to measure the botanicals properly, how to test the product for safety without risking blindness or worse. It's a different world from the crude mixing you've been doing in your room, more science than desperation. And as you absorb Anne's lessons, you realise that there's a kind of dignity in doing something well, even if that something is making illegal gin. One more thing, Anne says as you prepare to leave. If you're going to work with me, you'll need to move. St. Giles is no place for someone selling to the kind of customers I have. They'd never believe you came from there. The prospect of leaving your neighbourhood is both terrifying and thrilling. St. Giles may be a slum, but it's familiar. It's where you've survived since your husband died. I don't know if I can afford better lodgings, you admit. You can stay here until you get on your feet, Anne offers. I have a small room upstairs that my daughter used before she married. It's yours if you want it. The kindness nearly brings tears to your eyes. In a city as harsh as London, genuine generosity is rare. Thank you, you manage to say. I'll get my things tomorrow. As you step back out into the London evening, the city somehow looks different. Still dirty, still dangerous, still divided by vast gulfs of wealth and privilege. But now you can see a path forward, a way to navigate its perils with a bit more security. The gin craze that has gripped London might be a catastrophe for many, a slow death by poisoned spirit or a quick one at the end of a hangman's rope. But for you, Elizabeth Bowman, it might just be salvation. The next morning finds you back in St. Giles, stuffing your few belongings into a tattered cloth sack. There's not much to pack. A spare dress even more threadbare than the one you're wearing, a comb missing half its teeth, a small knife, and a locket with a snippet of your husband's hair. Everything you own fits into a bundle you can carry under one arm. Mrs. Cooper wheezes her way up the stairs as you're leaving, leaning heavily on the railing. "So it's true then," she says between laboured breaths. "You're leaving us." News travels fast in tenements like these. Everyone knows everyone's business, partly from nosiness and partly as a survival strategy. Knowing which neighbours you can trust can mean the difference between starving and scraping by. "Got an opportunity," you tell her vaguely. "Better lodgings, maybe steady work." You don't mention Anne or the gin business. The fewer people who know, the better. Mrs. Cooper nods, understanding the unspoken. "Good for you, Lizzie, though we'll miss your medicine." She winks, and you both know she means your gin. You press your last small bottle into her hand. "For your cough." "God bless you," she says, pocketing it. "Watch yourself out there. Different neighbourhoods have different dangers." You know she's right. St. Giles may be a slum, but it's a known quantity. You understand its rhythms, its threats, its unwritten rules. Moving to a more respectable area means learning a whole new set of social codes. Your landlord, a greasy-haired man who's always smelled faintly of onions, doesn't seem surprised when you tell him you're leaving. He just holds out his hand for the key, already thinking about how quickly he can rent your room to someone else. There's never a shortage of desperate people in London. "Owe me for the rest of the month," he grunts. "The roof leaks and there are rats in the walls," you counter. "Consider us even." He looks like he might argue, but apparently decides it's not worth the effort. Instead, he just spits on the floor and walks away, a gentleman to the end. With one last look at the dingy room that's been your home for the past 3 years, you close the door and head downstairs. You're not sentimental about the place. It's been shelter, nothing more, but there's still a strange feeling in your stomach as you step out onto the street. This is a change, a risk. And in your experience, change usually means trouble. But not this time, you tell yourself firmly. This time, change means opportunity. The walk to Anne's house takes nearly an hour, partly because you're carrying your bundle and partly because you're careful to take a roundabout route. Old habits die hard, and you still check over your shoulder for constables or informers. Anne welcomes you with a cup of tea, real tea, not the weak, twice-brewed dregs you're used to. The little luxuries in her home continue to surprise you. A china cup, a cushioned chair, windows that actually keep out the draft. "I've cleared out the upstairs room," she says, showing you to a small but clean chamber with an actual bed, not just a straw mattress on the floor. "It's not much, but it's yours for now. It's more than I've had in years," you admit, setting down your meagre bundle. Anne looks at your belongings with a critical eye. "We'll need to get you some new clothes. You can't meet my customers looking like you just crawled out of St. Giles." You glance down at your dress, seeing it suddenly through Anne's eyes, patched, stained, clearly marking you as someone from the poorest part of the city. "I can't afford," you begin, but Anne waves away your protest. "Consider it an investment in our business," she says. "Besides, I have some of my daughter's old things that might fit you with a bit of alteration." The idea of wearing clothes that aren't threadbare makes you feel both excited and uncomfortable. In St. Giles, looking too prosperous can make you a target, but here, in a respectable neighbourhood, looking poor marks you as suspicious. You spend the morning learning the basics of Anne's still, how to check the temperature, how to ensure the coil is properly cooled, how to collect the distilled spirit without wasting a drop. It's more complicated than your old method of just mixing raw spirit with flavourings, but you can already tell the result is far superior. "The trick," Anne explains, "is patience. Good gin can't be rushed. That's why most sellers use shortcuts. Turpentine for flavour, vitriol for kick. They're trying to make as much as possible as quickly as possible, because they're one step ahead of the constables," you point out. Anne nods. "Exactly. But in our business model, quality matters more than quantity. Our customers pay for the good stuff, and they expect it to actually be good." By midday, you've helped Anne prepare a batch of her Ladies' Restorative Cordial, essentially a well-made gin flavoured with juniper, lemon peel, and a touch of honey to soften the burn. It's packaged in small, elegant bottles with handwritten labels that make it look like legitimate medicine. "Now," Anne says, "time for your first delivery." She hands you a basket with 6 bottles carefully nestled in straw. "These are for some of my regular customers, ladies who prefer not to be seen visiting what might be mistaken for a gin shop. You'll take them their weekly tonics and collect payment." She gives you precise directions to each house, along with specific instructions about each customer. "Mrs. Trentham likes to chat, but don't stay too long or you'll never finish your rounds. Mrs. Winthrop, whom you met yesterday, is always worried about being discovered, so be discreet. Miss Lamb lives with her brother who doesn't approve, so you must only deliver when he's at his counting house." It's a whole new world of gin selling, one where the customers are ashamed, not because gin is associated with poverty and vice, but because ladies of quality aren't supposed to drink spirits at all. Tea, yes, wine occasionally, but gin is still seen as vulgar, even when repackaged as medicine. Anne helps you dress in one of her daughter's old gowns, a simple brown dress but made of wool much finer than anything you've worn in years. It's a little loose in the bodice. Her daughter was apparently more generously endowed than you, but with strategic pinning, it looks respectable enough. "Remember," Anne says as she adjusts your collar, "you're my niece from the country, helping me with my business of medicinal cordials. You're respectable, but not too educated, polite, but not familiar. You practice a curtsy, feeling ridiculous, but understanding the necessity." In Georgian London, appearances and manners matter enormously. The wrong word, the wrong gesture could mark you as an imposter in this world of middle-class respectability. "How do I look?" you ask, smoothing down the unfamiliar fabric. Anne steps back, evaluating you with a critical eye. "You'll do, though try not to walk like you're expecting to be robbed at any moment. You hadn't realised your habitual wariness was so obvious. You consciously relax your shoulders and try to adopt a more confident posture." "Better," Anne nods. "Now off you go. And remember, these aren't gin customers. They're ladies purchasing health tonics." With the basket over your arm and directions memorised, you set out into a London that seems almost foreign. Just a few streets away from the familiar squalor of St Giles, the city transforms. The buildings are better maintained, the streets somewhat cleaner. There are fewer beggars, fewer drunks collapsed in doorways. The people dress better, walk with more confidence, look at you with less desperation in their eyes. Your first stop is a neat townhouse near Covent Garden, home to Mrs. Trentham, a merchant's widow who, according to Anne, drinks enough tonic to stun a horse but never appears visibly affected. You knock on the servant's entrance as instructed, and a maid with a sour expression answers. "Yes?" she asks, looking you up and down suspiciously. "Delivery from Mrs. Anne for Mrs. Trentham," you say, trying to sound like this is perfectly routine for you. The maid's expression changes from suspicion to understanding. "Oh, the tonic. Yes, madam is expecting it. This way." She leads you through a kitchen that smells wonderfully of baking bread, up a back staircase, and into a small sitting room where a plump, rosy-cheeked woman sits, embroidering by the window. "The tonic delivery, ma'am," the maid announces. Mrs. Trentham looks up, her face brightening. "Ah, excellent. But you're not Anne." "Her niece, ma'am," you say, dropping into the curtsy you practiced. "Elizabeth, my aunt's rheumatism is troubling her today, so I'm making the deliveries." "How lovely of you to help your aunt," Mrs. Trentham says, setting aside her embroidery. "Do sit down a moment. Tell me, how are you finding London? Anne mentioned you're from the country." And just like that, you're drawn into conversation with a woman from a world entirely different from your own. Mrs. Trentham chatters about people you've never heard of, social events you couldn't hope to attend, concerns that would never cross your mind in St Giles. Like whether the new fabric for her drawing room curtains should be blue damask or green silk. You navigate the conversation carefully, offering vague responses about London being very grand and so different from home. When she asks where exactly in the country you're from, you mention a small village near where your husband once told you he grew up. You know, just enough details to sound convincing. All the while, Mrs. Trentham sips tea that, judging from the faint smell wafting across the room, has been generously enhanced with gin from a previous delivery. After what feels like an eternity of small talk, you finally manage to extract yourself with the promise that Anne herself will visit next week. Mrs. Trentham presses payment into your hand, a sum that would have taken you days to earn selling penny glasses in St Giles. Your next deliveries follow a similar pattern, though not all customers are as chatty as Mrs. Trentham. Mrs. Winthrop, whom you met yesterday, barely opens her door wide enough to take the bottle and hand over coins, her eyes darting nervously up and down the street the entire time. Miss Lamb, a spinster living in her successful brother's home, meets you in the garden, quickly hiding the bottle in her sewing basket. "If Frederick knew," she whispers, though no one is within earshot, "he would be most displeased. He thinks my nerves are calmed by prayer and needlework." She gives a small, rebellious smile. Prayer and gin work much better. By late afternoon, your basket is empty of bottles but heavy with coins. You've made more money in one day than you might have seen in 2 weeks of your previous life. It's both exhilarating and unsettling. On your way back to Anne's, you pass through an area where the streets are lined with gin shops, not hidden operations like Anne's, but licensed establishments with proper signs. Since the disastrous Gin Act of 1736, which drove the trade underground, the government has been gradually adjusting its approach. The current laws still restrict gin sales, but the licenses are more affordable, allowing some sellers to operate legally. These legitimate gin shops are a world away from the back-alley operations and puss and mew setups of the poorest neighbourhoods. They have proper counters, glasses rather than crude cups, sometimes even seating, and their customers aren't just labourers seeking oblivion, but include tradesmen, clerks, even the occasional gentleman slumming it. Outside one such establishment, a crowd has gathered. At first, you think it might be a fight or an arrest, common enough sights in gin-soaked London, but as you draw closer, you realise it's something else entirely. A well-dressed man stands on a crate, addressing the crowd with passionate gestures. "The gin curse destroys our city," he proclaims. "It ruins families, breeds crime, and turns honest workers into drunkards and thieves." He's one of the moral reformers who've been gaining influence lately, men who see gin as the root of all London's social ills. Some are religious, like Bishop Wilson, who calls gin drinkers ungovernable. Others, like this speaker, approach it as a matter of public welfare and economic productivity. "Every penny spent on gin is a penny taken from the mouths of children," the man continues. "Every hour spent in drunken stupor is an hour stolen from honest labour." There's a murmur of both agreement and dissent from the crowd. A woman near you mutters, easy for him to say with his wine cellar and his coffee house memberships. She's right, of course. The moral panic about gin is deeply hypocritical. The wealthy drink just as much as the poor. They just do it with imported brandy and fine wines rather than cheap gin. No one is calling for restrictions on those. As if to underscore the point, a well-dressed gentleman emerges from the gin shop, slightly unsteady on his feet. He listens to the reformer's speech with an amused expression before calling out, "Perhaps, sir, you should preach temperance at the gentlemen's clubs of St. James's before condemning the simple pleasures of the working man." This draws cheers from part of the crowd and scowls from others. The class divisions of Georgian London are never far from the surface, and gin sits right on the fault line. The reformer tries to continue his speech, but the disruption has broken his momentum. As the crowd's attention fragments, you slip away, not wanting to be noticed. Back at Anne's house, you find her sorting herbs at her kitchen table, the room fragrant with juniper, coriander, and dried citrus peel. "Oh, successful day?" she asks, eyeing your lighter basket. "All delivered," you confirm, counting out the money, though I passed a man giving a speech against gin on my way back, called it a curse destroying the city. Anne snorts derisively. "There's one on every corner these days. Reformers. They call themselves. Most have never known a day of real hardship in their lives. They don't understand that for many, gin is the only comfort available." He said gin takes food from children's mouths, you recall. And what would those children eat if their mothers couldn't earn money selling it, Anne counters, or if their fathers couldn't dull the pain of breaking their bodies in the docks all day? It's easy to condemn when you've never had to choose between bad options. She has a point. In the brutal economy of Georgian London, gin is both problem and solution, a source of income for thousands like you and Anne, a brief escape for countless others, a health hazard for many, and a moral panic for the privileged classes who see only the negative consequences. Still, Anne continues more gently, that's why I try to make mine as clean and safe as possible. Too much of anything can be a poison, but bad gin is always a poison. She shows you how to test the strength of the spirit by lighting a small amount on fire. The colour and intensity of the flame indicate its alcohol content. Too weak and customers feel cheated. Too strong and it can do real harm, she explains. As evening falls, you help Anne prepare dinner. A simple stew, but with actual meat in it, a luxury you've rarely enjoyed in recent years. The warmth and relative comfort of her home still feels strange, almost undeserved. You'll get used to it, Anne says, noticing your hesitation as you sit down to eat at a proper table with a cloth. The first time I could afford a real dinner after years of near starvation, I almost couldn't eat it. Felt like it should go to someone who needed it more. How did you overcome that, you ask, breaking off a piece of bread, fresh bread, another rarity in your life? Anne smiles wryly. Realised I was that someone who needed it. Surviving isn't just about not dying, Elizabeth. Eventually, you have to allow yourself to live. After dinner, Anne teaches you more about her gin-making process, showing you how to filter the spirit through charcoal to remove impurities, how to measure botanicals precisely, how to test each batch for consistency. Tomorrow, she says, as you're cleaning the equipment, we'll visit my supplier. He's an apothecary in the city who sells me juniper and other botanicals, claims they're for perfume making. She winks. We all have our little fictions. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in years, you find sleep elusive despite your exhaustion. Your mind keeps returning to the contrasts of the day, the desperate gin drinkers collapsed in St. Giles' doorways versus the respectable ladies sipping tonic in their comfortable homes. The hidden Puss and Mew operations versus the licensed gin shops. The moral condemnation from those who've never known true want. London in the grip of the gin craze is a city of contradictions, and you've now seen both sides of it, the ruinous effects on the poorest and the hypocritical consumption by the better off, and you're caught somewhere in the middle, no longer destitute but far from secure, selling a product that's both demonized and desired. As you finally drift towards sleep, one thought keeps returning. In this gin-soaked city, you're managing to stay afloat by learning to swim with the current rather than against it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll eventually reach safer shores. Morning comes with the unfamiliar sensation of being well rested. The quiet of Anne's neighbourhood is a stark contrast to the constant noise of St. Giles, where even at night there were always shouts, cries, the occasional scream. Anne is already up when you come downstairs, dressed in a neat gown with a clean apron. Good, you're awake, she says. We have deliveries this morning, then we'll visit Mr. Winters, my supplier. She hands you a cup of tea and a plate with bread and cheese. Another real breakfast. A luxury that still feels strange. Also, she adds, I've been thinking about your training. You need to learn the whole business, not just deliveries and basic distilling. What else is there, you ask, between bites? The accounts, for one thing, Anne says, knowing what we spend, what we earn, tracking who's paid and who owes, and cultivating customers, finding new ladies who need tonics without attracting the wrong kind of attention. It's becoming clear that Anne's operation is far more sophisticated than the hand-to-mouth selling you're used to. She's running a real business, albeit an illegal one, with all the planning and management that entails. After breakfast, you accompany Anne on her delivery rounds to customers on the other side of her neighbourhood. Unlike yesterday's clients, who were mostly middle-class merchants' wives and widows, today's are somewhat higher on the social ladder. The first stop is particularly intimidating, a large house near Bedford Square, home to Lady Jenkins, the widow of a minor knight. You've never been in the presence of nobility before, even the lower ranks, and your nervousness must show. "Relax," Anne whispers as a livid servant leads you up a back staircase. They put their stays on one lace at a time, just like everyone else, and they're often the ones most desperate for gin. All those social constraints make for thirsty women. Lady Jenkins proves this point. She receives you in her morning room, already looking flushed despite the early hour. The emptying of a tonic bottle on her side table suggests she's well into her daily consumption. "Anne, my saviour," she greets with slightly too much enthusiasm. "And who is this?" "My niece, Elizabeth, my lady," Anne replies with a respectful but not servile nod. "She's assisting me with my business." "Charming," Lady Jenkins says, barely glancing at you. Her attention is fixed on the basket Anne carries. "You've brought my monthly supply." "As requested, my lady. The special blend with extra lemon essence." Lady Jenkins's special blend is essentially a stronger version of the regular tonic, you'll later learn, closer to pure gin with less of the herbal disguise. She consumes more in a month than most of Anne's customers do in 3. As Anne counts out bottles, Lady Jenkins lowers her voice conspiratorially. "Have you heard about the Duchess of Marlborough? They say she takes laudanum with her gin now, claims it's for her nerves, but we all know better." Anne makes appropriate noises of shock while continuing to unpack bottles. The gossip flows freely, much of it centred on who among the upper classes is drinking what. It seems gin addiction reaches all levels of society, just hidden behind different facades depending on one's station. After collecting a substantial payment from Lady Jenkins, you and Anne continue your rounds. By midday, your basket is again empty of bottles and full of coins. "Now," Anne says, "to Mr. Winters, and remember, we're purchasing ingredients for ladies' perfumes and health cordials, nothing about gin." Mr. Winters's apothecary shop sits on a busy street in the city, the mercantile heart of London. The bell above the door tinkles as you enter, and you're immediately enveloped in a cloud of mingled scents, herbs, spices, chemicals, and something vaguely medicinal. The apothecary himself is a thin man with spectacles perched on a prominent nose. He looks up from grinding something in a mortar and smiles in recognition. "Mrs. Anne, a pleasure as always." His eyes shift to you with polite curiosity. "Mr. Winters, this is my niece, Elizabeth. She's learning the cordial business." "Ah, keeping it in the family. Very wise." He nods approvingly. "The usual supplies, I presume?" "Yes, though perhaps a bit more juniper this time. My ladies have been particularly fond of that fragrance lately." The transaction proceeds with this same careful language, never mentioning gin directly, though everyone knows exactly what the supplies are for. Mr. Winters weighs out juniper berries, coriander seeds, angelica root, and various other botanicals, packaging each in paper twists. As he works, he chats amiably about business and city gossip. "Did you hear they arrested Thomas Becker last week? Running a gin cellar without a licence, they said." Anne's expression remains neutral. "I hadn't heard. How unfortunate." "Indeed, though between us," Mr. Winters lowers his voice, "I suspect it was more about who he sold to rather than what he sold. Started catering to apprentices and young clerks. Masters complained their workers were perpetually sotted." This is another truth of the gin craze. Enforcement often depends less on the letter of the law than on who's being affected. When gin impairs the productivity of workers, suddenly it becomes a priority for the authorities. With your purchases wrapped and paid for, you and Anne head back through streets increasingly crowded with midday traffic. carts, carriages, sedan chairs carrying the wealthy who prefer not to soil their shoes on London's filthy streets. Mr. Winters seems to know a lot about the gin trade for an apothecary, you observe quietly as you walk. Anne chuckles. He supplies half the illegal distillers in London with their botanicals, knows more about what's happening in the trade than most of the sellers themselves. If anyone's ever arrested, he hears about it first. Isn't that risky for him? Less than you'd think. He's careful with his words, never sells complete gin-making kits and has enough respectable business to provide cover. Besides, she adds with a meaningful look, he provides certain medicinal preparations to some very influential people who wouldn't want him inconvenienced. It's another reminder of how the gin trade, like everything in Georgian London, operates within a complex web of power, privilege and selective enforcement. The same laws that might send you to the House of Correction barely touch someone with the right connections. As you turn on to Anne's street, you notice a constable standing near her door speaking to a neighbour. Anne sees him too and smoothly changes direction, leading you down a side alley. "Let's take the back way," she says calmly, but you can hear the tension in her voice. You circle around to approach Anne's house from the rear, entering through the garden gate. Inside, she immediately goes to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. "He's still there," she reports grimly. "And now there's another one with him." "Are they looking for you?" you ask, your heart racing with familiar fear. "You just started to feel safe, and now this." Anne shakes her head. "Not necessarily. Could be a routine patrol, could be they're investigating something else entirely, but you both know it could also be trouble. Even Anne's more discreet business isn't completely safe from the law. What do we do?" you ask, instinctively gathering the botanical packages to hide them. Anne considers for a moment, then makes a decision. "We wait. If they come to the door, I'm a respectable widow who makes medicinal cordials for ladies with delicate constitutions. You're my niece from the country, nothing illegal about that." But as the afternoon wears on, and the constables remain stationed outside, occasionally speaking to passers-by and pointing at houses, Anne's composure begins to crack. "Something's not right," she murmurs, checking the street again. "They're being too persistent." Just then, there's a sharp knock at the back door that makes you both jump. Anne motions for you to stay quiet and approaches cautiously. "Who is it?" she calls through the door. "It's me, Sarah," comes a woman's voice. "Let me in, quickly." Anne immediately opens the door to reveal a young woman in a servant's dress, looking anxiously over her shoulder. "Sarah works for Mrs. Winthrop," Anne explains as she ushers the girl inside. "What's happening?" Sarah wrings her hands nervously. "They've arrested Mr. Kellaway 3 doors down for selling gin without a license. They found his still and everything. Now they're going door to door, asking questions about other sellers in the neighbourhood." Anne's face pales. "Have they mentioned me?" "Not by name, ma'am, but they're asking about anyone who might be making or selling spirits. Mrs. Winthrop sent me to warn you. She says you should clear out anything incriminating. It's a kindness you wouldn't have expected from the nervous Mrs. Winthrop, and it speaks to how valued Anne's tonic must be to her." "Thank you, Sarah," Anne says, pressing a coin into the girl's hand. "You've taken a risk coming here." "Mrs. Winthrop would be most upset if her supply was interrupted," Sarah says, with a knowing look before slipping back out the garden door. As soon as she's gone, Anne springs into action. "We need to dismantle the still and hide the botanicals. Quickly now." You work together, taking apart the small copper still and concealing its components in various innocent-looking containers, the coil in a basket of knitting, the pot under a false bottom in a trunk, the collection vessel amongst kitchen crockery. The juniper and other botanicals go into tea caddies and spice jars disguised amongst normal household herbs. Bottles of finished tonic are hidden behind a loose board in the pantry. You've just finished when there's another knock, this time at the front door. Anne takes a deep breath, smooths her apron, and nods to you. Remember medicinal cordials, nothing more. She opens the door to find, as expected, the two constables. They're both burly men with the weathered faces of those who've spent years patrolling London's streets. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the older one says, removing his hat with perfunctory politeness. "We're making inquiries in the neighbourhood regarding illegal gin selling." "Gin?" Anne repeats, her expression one of mild surprise. "How shocking. I've heard it's a terrible problem in some areas." "Indeed, ma'am. We have reason to believe there may be unlicensed operations in this very street. A Mr. Kellaway has been arrested, and he's suggested others might be involved." Your blood runs cold at these words. If Kellaway is naming names to save his own skin, Anne could be in real danger, but Anne's composure doesn't falter. "Well, I certainly know nothing about that. I'm a widow who makes medicinal cordials for ladies with delicate constitutions." She gestures toward you. "My niece, Elizabeth from the country, helps with deliveries." The younger constable's eyes narrow. "Cordials, you say? Made with what, exactly?" "Herbs, mostly," Anne replies smoothly. "Chamomile for nerves, mint for digestion, rose for feminine complaints. I'd be happy to show you my recipe book." She reaches for a small volume on a nearby shelf. A genuine herb book, you realise, that she keeps exactly for this purpose. The constables glance at each other, clearly uncertain. Anne's respectable appearance and confident manner make it difficult for them to press too hard without evidence. "We've been told someone on this street purchases large quantities of juniper berries," the older constable says, watching Anne's face carefully for a reaction. "Juniper? Oh yes, I use that occasionally," Anne admits readily. "It's excellent for urinary complaints. Many older ladies suffer, you know." She says this last part in a slightly lowered voice, as if sharing a delicate medical confidence. The constable shifts uncomfortably, clearly not wanting to pursue this line of questioning about women's ailments. "Perhaps we could see your, workshop," the younger one suggests, "where you prepare these cordials." "Of course," Anne agrees, leading them to the kitchen. "Though I've just cleaned up for the day. Elizabeth and I were about to have our tea." The constables look around the kitchen, which now appears perfectly innocent. Just the normal workspace of a woman who might make medicinal preparations with nothing to suggest gin production. They open a few cupboards, peer into jars, but their search is cursory. Without specific evidence or a warrant, they can't tear the place apart, and nothing obvious gives away Anne's real business. After a few more questions about her customers, respectable ladies with health concerns, her suppliers, Mr. Winters, a reputable apothecary, and how long she's been in the cordial business since her husband died 10 years ago, they seem satisfied, or at least stymied. "Thank you for your cooperation, ma'am," the older constable says, donning his hat again. "If you happen to hear anything about illegal gin operations, you'll inform us, of course." Naturally, Anne agrees, the perfect picture of a law-abiding citizen. One can't be too careful these days. So many unsavoury types about. Only when the door is firmly closed and the constables can be seen heading down the street do you both let out the breaths you've been holding. "That was close," you whisper, collapsing into a chair. Anne nods grimly. "Too close. Kellaway must be talking, trying to reduce his own punishment. We'll need to be even more careful now." What happens to him, you ask? To Kellaway, I mean. Depends on the magistrate, Anne says. Could be a fine if he's lucky, could be the House of Correction, could be worse if they decide to make an example of him. The gin laws are still harsh, even if they're not as draconian as they were a decade ago, and with moral reformers increasingly vocal about the gin crisis, the authorities are under pressure to show they're taking action. Maybe we should stop for a while, you suggest, just until things calm down. Anne considers this, then shakes her head. We can't afford to. My customers depend on their tonics, and we depend on their money. But we will need to be more cautious, perhaps change our delivery schedule, take different routes, and definitely reduce production for the next few weeks. As evening falls, you help Anne retrieve and reassemble her still. The brush with the law has shaken you both, but the economic reality remains unchanged. This is your livelihood, and stopping isn't an option. The thing about the gin trade, Anne says as you carefully reconnect the coil to the pot, is that it survives because people need it. Not just the drinkers, but the sellers, the suppliers, everyone involved. For many of us, it's gin or starvation. And that, perhaps, is the heart of the gin craze that has gripped London. Necessity as much as addiction, survival as much as indulgence. In a city where clean water is scarce, food prices are high, and work is brutal when it's available at all, gin provides both escape for some and livelihood for others. As you settle in for the night, your new bed no longer feels quite as secure as it did yesterday. The constable's visit is a stark reminder that in Georgian London, security is always conditional, safety always temporary. The gin trade that has given you a chance at a better life could just as easily lead you to prison. But as Anne said, what choice do you really have? This is the world you inhabit, a world where survival often means walking the knife edge between law and necessity, where morality is a luxury many simply cannot afford. Sleep comes fitfully, filled with dreams of constables, hidden stills, and rivers of gin flowing through London's streets, drowning the unwary. A week passes with no further visits from the constables. You and Anne settle into a cautious routine, still making and delivering gin, but with added precautions. You take different routes each day, space out deliveries to avoid patterns, and Anne has reduced production slightly, just enough to be safer without losing essential income. You're adapting well to your new life. The respectable clothes, regular meals, and absence of constant fear have begun to change you. Your hands, once rough and chapped from harsh conditions, are softening. Your face has lost its pinched, hungry look. Even your posture has changed. You stand straighter, walk more confidently. You're becoming a proper lady's companion, Anne remarks one morning as you prepare for deliveries. Hard to believe you were selling gin from your pockets in St. Giles just weeks ago. Don't know about lady, you reply, smoothing down your borrowed dress. But it's nice not having constables chase me through the alleys every other day. Anne smiles. Today I'm going to show you something different. We're visiting the Dark Horse. What's that? A licensed gin shop, owned by my old friend Henry. It's important you understand how the legal side of the trade works. Licensed gin shops are a relatively new development in London. After the disastrous 1736 Gin Act drove the entire trade underground, the government realised prohibition wasn't working. Their more recent approach involves making licences more affordable while still regulating sales. It hasn't solved the gin crisis, but it's brought some of the trade into the open where it can be monitored and taxed. You set out mid-morning after completing essential deliveries to Anne's most regular customers. The Dark Horse is located near Holborn, in an area where tradespeople, clerks and labourers mix with the occasional slumming gentleman. From the outside, it's surprisingly respectable. A proper shopfront with a painted sign showing a black horse rearing against a blue background. No hidden entrances or secretive whispers here, just a straightforward place to buy and consume gin. Inside, the difference between this and the illegal dram shops of St Giles is striking. The floor is clean swept, there's actual seating along the walls, and a long polished counter runs the length of the room. Behind it stand rows of bottles on shelves, and a man in a clean apron serves customers with an actual measuring glass rather than just sloshing spirit into whatever container is available. "Henry," Anne calls, waving to the man behind the counter. The proprietor looks up, his weathered face breaking into a broad smile. "Anne, my dear, what a rare pleasure." He comes around the counter to embrace her warmly, then regards you with friendly curiosity. "And who's this?" "My niece, Elizabeth," Anne says, using the now familiar cover story. "She's helping with my business." "Welcome to the Dark Horse, Elizabeth," Henry says, bowing slightly. He's a man in his 50s, you guess, with the strong hands of someone who's worked hard all his life, but the keen eyes of a businessman. Any relation of Anne's is welcome here. The gin shop isn't crowded at this hour. A few labourers sit nursing glasses in the corner, taking a break from their morning work. A clerk type hunches over his drink alone, perhaps steeling himself for an afternoon of ledgers and figures. A pair of women in modest but neat dress chat, quietly over glasses so small they must hold barely a mouthful. "Quiet today," Anne observes as Henry leads you to a small table in the corner. "It'll pick up afternoon," Henry says. "Always does. Will you take a glass? On the house, of course." Anne nods. "Your special reserve, if you have it." Henry returns shortly with 3 small glasses of clear liquid. You notice immediately that it looks cleaner, more refined than the rough spirit sold in the slums. "Your health," Henry says, raising his glass slightly before taking a small sip. You follow suit, expecting the familiar burn of gin, but are surprised by the smoothness. It still has the juniper flavour, still warms your throat, but it doesn't feel like it's stripping the lining from your insides. "Good, isn't it?" Anne says, noting your expression. "This is what properly made gin should taste like. No turpentine, no vitriol, no adulterants." "How do you stay in business charging licence fees when there's so much cheaper gin available?" you ask Henry directly. He chuckles. "Smart question. The answer is quality and safety. My customers know what they're getting, won't blind them or kill them. Worth paying a bit more for that assurance. Plus respectability," Anne adds. "Some people won't buy from street sellers or visit dram shops, but they'll come to a licensed establishment." "That too," Henry agrees, "though I get plenty who start here early in the day, all proper, then end up in the penny gin shops by evening when they've drunk away their funds and still want more. This is the dark reality of the gin craze. It creates a thirst that's never fully quenched, driving people from respectable consumption to increasingly desperate measures as addiction takes hold." As you talk, the shop begins to fill with the midday crowd. More labourers, a few women who might be servants on their break, a couple of apprentices who look barely old enough to drink but already have the glazed eyes of regular consumers. "See that woman there," Henry says quietly, nodding toward a haggard figure who's just entered. "She used to be a governess in a good family, started taking gin for her nerves, they said, lost her position when they found her passed out with the children unattended. Now she begs and does whatever else she can to afford her daily drinks." The woman's hands shake visibly as she places a few coins on the counter, receiving a small glass in return. She downs it in one swift motion, then immediately orders another, counting out her remaining money with painful care. "And that man by the window?" Anne joins in. "He was a skilled cabinet maker, had a shop of his own, apprentices. Gin took it all. Now he does odd jobs when he's sober enough, which isn't often." These are the casualties of the gin epidemic, people whose lives have been derailed by what started as casual consumption. You've seen plenty like them in St. Giles, but somehow their presence here in this cleaner, more respectable establishment makes their decline more stark, more tragic. "So you see why I make my gin as safe as possible," Anne says, "and why I limit how much I sell to any one customer. I don't want this to happen to my ladies." Henry snorts. "Your ladies are just as addicted, Anne. They just have enough money to maintain appearances." "Perhaps," Anne concedes, "but at least they're not drinking poison, and they can still function in their lives." The conversation is interrupted by the entrance of a group of well-dressed young men, clearly gentlemen slumming it for amusement. They're loud, already half-drunk from lunch, and immediately dominate the room with their entitled presence. "Your finest gin, my good man," the leader calls to Henry, slapping coins on the counter with unnecessary force. "And be quick about it." Henry's expression tightens, but he serves them promptly. You can tell he doesn't appreciate their tone, but can't afford to turn away paying customers, especially those who might spend freely. "7 shillings for that little bottle?" one of the gentlemen exclaims. "Highway robbery." "That's my best gin, sir," Henry replies evenly. "Dutch import, not local." "Well, pour it then. Let's see if it's worth the king's ransom you're charging." The gentlemen take their drinks to a table, making a great show of tasting critically and pronouncing judgment like connoisseurs, though their already inebriated state suggests they're hardly discerning drinkers. "Typical," Anne murmurs. "They'll drink themselves silly here, then go to their clubs and complain about the gin problem among the lower orders, as if their brandy and port make them any less drunk." This hypocrisy is at the heart of the gin crisis. The wealthy and powerful condemn gin consumption by the poor while indulging freely themselves in other spirits. They pass laws restricting cheap gin while ensuring their own preferred drinks remain easily available. As you watch, the young gentlemen become increasingly boisterous, calling for more drinks, making loud remarks about the other patrons, behaving as if the place exists solely for their entertainment. "Should we leave?" you ask Anne, noticing how uncomfortable the atmosphere has become. She nods. "I think we've seen enough for today." You say your goodbyes to Henry, who's too busy managing the rowdy gentleman to do more than wave. Outside, the relative quiet of the street is a relief after the tense atmosphere inside. "That's another side of the gin trade," Anne says as you walk back toward her neighbourhood. "The licensed places are safer, more regulated, but they're caught between worlds, trying to be respectable enough for their license, but still selling a product that's associated with vice and poverty." "And those gentlemen," you ask, "do they really not see their own hypocrisy?" Anne shrugs. "People see what they want to see. To them, their drinking is sophisticated indulgence. The poor man's drinking is moral failure. Same gin, different bottle." As you turn onto a busier street, you notice a crowd gathered around a man standing on a crate, another temperance preacher by the looks of him, Bible in hand, condemning the evils of gin. "The devil's drink," he proclaims dramatically, "stealing the bread from children's mouths, turning women into harlots and men into beasts." The crowd's reaction is mixed. Some nod in agreement, others heckle, many simply listen out of momentary curiosity before moving on with their day. He's not entirely wrong, Anne admits quietly as you skirt the edge of the gathering. Gin has ruined many lives, but what he doesn't understand is that for many, it's not just about the drink itself, but what it represents, a brief escape from unbearable conditions. Like medicine for the soul instead of the body, you suggest. Anne looks at you with surprise. That's quite a poetic way to put it. But yes, I suppose so, though it's medicine that often kills the patient in the end. Back at Anne's house, you help her prepare a new batch of tonic, working with the skills she's been teaching you. Your hands are steadier now, your measurements more precise. You're becoming a proper distiller, not just a mixer of dubious ingredients. You're a quick learner, Anne observes as you correctly adjust the flame under the still. Another month and you could run your own operation. The comment catches you off guard. You haven't thought much about the future beyond the immediate relief of having food, shelter, and relative safety. The idea of having your own business, being truly independent, is both thrilling and terrifying. I couldn't afford a still, you point out, or suppliers, or a safe place to work. All things that come with time and careful saving, Anne says. I didn't start with much more than you had, just a determination not to end up in the workhouse after James died. Before you can respond, there's a knock at the door. Not the front entrance, but the back garden door, which is unusual. Anne frowns, motioning for you to stay with the still while she answers. You hear muffled voices, then Anne returns with a young man you don't recognise. He's perhaps in his mid-20s, simply but neatly dressed, with an intelligent face currently creased with worry. Elizabeth, this is Robert, Mrs. Winthrop's son, Anne introduces him. He has some troubling news. Robert nods to you distractedly, clearly more concerned with his message than with pleasantries. Mother sent me to warn you, he says to Anne. The constables are conducting searches again, this time with warrants. They've already raided 3 houses on Lambert Street. Your blood runs cold. Warrants mean they can legally search homes, not just ask questions at the door. If they come here, all your careful hiding of equipment won't matter. They'll have the authority to tear the place apart. Did they find anything? Anne asks, her voice steady despite the threat. 2 stills and several gallons of gin at old Mrs. Peters's place, Robert confirms grimly. They've arrested her, and they found bottles at the Clarkson house, though no still. They're taking statements, asking who supplied them. The implication is clear. If those arrested give up their suppliers or customers to save themselves, Anne could be next on the list for investigation. Thank you for the warning, Robert, Anne says. Your mother is very kind to risk sending you. She's worried about her medicine, Robert says, with a wry smile that suggests he's well aware of what his mother is really consuming. She asked me to inquire if you might have any set aside for emergencies. Anne hesitates only briefly before going to her hiding place and retrieving 2 bottles of tonic. She wraps them carefully in cloth and hands them to Robert. Tell her to make these last, she warns. I may need to suspend deliveries for a while. Robert tucks the package inside his coat. She'll understand, and I'll keep an ear out for any more news about the searches. After he leaves, Anne immediately begins dismantling the still, working with urgent Victorian fashion was so extreme that women's corsets could reduce their waist size by up to 10 inches. The average woman's natural waist was 27 to 29 inches, but society celebrated the ideal 18-inch waist, all while doctors raised concerns about breathing difficulties and circulation problems. If you enjoy these stories, hit subscribe. Also, drop your location in the comments. I'm always curious where everyone's listening from. We're heading to Victorian England in a minute. First though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second, adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. The pressure around your ribs is the first thing you notice. Even before opening your eyes, you can feel it, like a giant hand squeezing your torso. Welcome to morning as a Victorian woman in 1870. You blink awake in a modest bedroom, lying on a horsehair mattress that crinkles when you shift. The room is cold, damn cold actually. The coal fire died hours ago and frost patterns decorate the inside of your window panes. Unlike your cosy blanket right now, the thin wool coverings barely trap any heat. Time to rise, ma'am. Your lady's maid, Agnes, has entered silently. She's already been up for hours, lighting fires, preparing your clothes, heating water. She looks exhausted, but that's not your concern right now. You have your own battle ahead. Is it really necessary today, you ask, eyeing the contraption Agnes is laying out on the dressing table. I'm only visiting Mother. Agnes gives you that look, the one that says, we have this conversation every morning. Your mother would be the first to notice if you weren't properly dressed, ma'am, she replies diplomatically. She's right, your mother would definitely notice and comment, and then tell everyone else she knows. The thought makes your stomach clench. The corset lies there like an instrument of torture, which honestly it basically is. Whalebone and steel designed to force your body into an impossible shape. Last week you heard about a woman whose corset was so tight that when she died they found her ribs had grown around it. Like a tree growing around a fence. Your body literally reshaping itself to accommodate this cage. Shall we begin? Agnes asks. First comes the chemise, a thin cotton undergarment that serves as a barrier between your skin and the corset. Then cotton drawers tied at the waist. Already you're warmer. Silver linings, I guess. Agnes holds the corset up against your torso. It's a well-made piece, custom fitted last year when you still had dreams of achieving an 18-inch waist. You're hovering around 20 inches now, which your husband has deemed acceptable. How generous of him. Deep breath, ma'am, Agnes warns. You inhale as much as possible, knowing that soon breathing deeply won't be an option. Agnes wraps the corset around your torso and begins the lacing process. The first few tugs are manageable, just a gentle pressure, but as Agnes works her way down, each pull becomes more restrictive. Your ribs compress, your lungs can't fully expand, your internal organs are literally shifting position. A bit tighter, ma'am. The blue dress needs a smaller waist. Just a bit more, you gasp. Agnes braces her foot against the bedpost for leverage, pulling the laces with all her strength. You grip the bedpost, knuckles white. Jesus, you mutter under your breath. How is this fashion? Language, ma'am, Agnes reminds you, but there's sympathy in her voice. She's not immune. She wears a corset too, though a cheaper, less restrictive version. The pressure required for your waist would prevent her from completing her physically demanding work. With a final tug, Agnes ties off the laces. You try to breathe and find you can only take shallow sips of air. Your lower ribs are compressed almost to meeting in the middle. There now. Beautiful, Agnes says, steering you toward the mirror. The transformation is undeniable. Your waist is impossibly small, creating that coveted hourglass figure. But at what cost? You already feel lightheaded, and you haven't even gone downstairs yet. Dr. Harrison's warning echoes in your mind. These contraptions are slowly killing you, ladies, he'd said during your last visit for female troubles. Your mother had been scandalized, insisting he was being dramatic. But when he showed you those medical drawings, the way organs get crushed and displaced, you couldn't unsee it. The women in your circle dismiss such warnings. Men have always tried to control what we wear, your friend Elizabeth had said last week. First they want us in corsets, then they claim to want us out of them for our health. Make up your minds, gentlemen. You had laughed along, but privately wondered if maybe the doctors had a point. Your monthly courses had become irregular and painful since tightening your corset to please your husband, and that fainting spell at the Hendersons' dinner party last month, definitely from lack of oxygen. Now, for the petticoats, Agnes announces, holding up what looks like enough fabric to sail a small ship. Layer by layer, Agnes builds your silhouette. First, the cotton petticoat, then 2 more made of heavier material. Already, you're carrying several pounds of fabric, all hanging from your compressed waist. Your lower back begins to ache in protest. I was reading about this American woman, you tell Agnes as she works. Amelia Bloomer. She wears trousers under a shorter skirt. Can you imagine? Agnes looks scandalised. Trousers on a lady. What would the neighbours say? That's exactly what my husband said, you sigh. But think how much easier it would be to move, to breathe, to exist. Easier isn't always proper, Mum, Agnes says diplomatically, though you can see a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Next comes your bustle, a metal cage that attaches at your lower back, creating that fashionable posterior shelf that men supposedly find attractive. It adds another pound of weight and makes sitting a strategic challenge. You'll spend the day perching on the edges of chairs or standing until your feet throb. The blue dress goes on last, a beautiful creation of silk and lace with 57 tiny buttons down the back that poor Agnes must fasten one by one. By the time she's done, your back is ramrod straight, your waist is cinched to painful proportions, and your lungs can only expand by about half their capacity. There, Agnes says with satisfaction, you look like a proper lady. You study your reflection. Yes, you've achieved the ideal Victorian silhouette. Tiny waist, ample bosom, wide hips. The dress is beautiful, but already spots dance before your eyes from shallow breathing. Your ribs send shooting pains with every movement. And you know that by evening the flesh under your corset will be raw and chafed, possibly bleeding in spots. Is beauty worth this? Agnes brings your jewellery next, a cameo brooch from your husband, earrings from your father, and a delicate gold chain. These small personal touches are the only parts of your appearance truly under your control. Oh, I almost forgot, Agnes says, retrieving a small bottle from your dressing table. Your mother sent this over. She says all the ladies are using it for a youthful complexion. You examine the bottle. Dr. Campbell's Arsenic Complexion Wafers. Arsenic? You ask, alarmed. Isn't that poison? In large doses, ma'am, but these are perfectly safe in small amounts. The lady down the street has been taking them for months and her skin is like porcelain. You've heard the rumours, though. The woman 3 doors down who took similar wafers and ended up with tremors in her hands. The socialite who died suddenly after using arsenic powders for years. I think I'll pass for today, you say, setting the bottle aside. Agnes looks worried. Your mother will ask if you've tried them. Then let her ask. This small rebellion feels significant. You can't escape the corset. Not yet, anyway, but you can refuse to literally poison yourself for beauty. As Agnes styles your hair, you gaze out the window at the street below. A delivery boy races past on a bicycle, moving freely, breathing deeply. You feel a stab of envy so intense it takes you by surprise. Do you ever wonder what it would be like, you ask Agnes suddenly, to move through the world without all this? Agnes pauses, hairpin in hand. Sometimes, ma'am, when I see my brother run across a field or climb a tree, she lowers her voice. And sometimes at night, I loosen my corset when no one's looking, just to remember what it feels like to take a real breath. This confession creates an unexpected moment of solidarity between you, two women separated by class but united by the same physical restrictions. Maybe someday, you say, though you don't finish the thought. Agnes adds the final touches to your hair, a complex arrangement of curls and twists that you couldn't possibly reproduce on your own. Another way you're dependent on others just to present yourself acceptably to society. Ready to go downstairs, Mum? You nod, though ready isn't quite the word. You're armoured, packaged, presented, but definitely not comfortable or free. You stand carefully, feeling the weight of the fabrics, the squeeze of the corset, the pinch of two small shoes. The day stretches before you, a series of restrictive spaces, limited movements, shallow breaths, and careful social performances. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. As you make your way toward the door, you catch sight of a pamphlet on your writing desk, something your husband's progressive cousin had slipped to you at last week's dinner party. The Rational Dress Society, the headline reads. You'd hidden it quickly, but the ideas inside have been haunting you. Could women really dress differently? Could you someday walk through the world without feeling like your body is in a cage? Agnes follows your gaze and quickly adjusts your skirt, drawing your attention away from the forbidden literature. Best not to dwell on such things, Ma'am, she says quietly. Some battles can't be won in a day. You take as deep a breath as your corset allows and prepare to descend the stairs. One careful step at a time, as befits a proper Victorian lady. The weight of expectations feels heavier than all your clothing combined. Breakfast is a painful affair, not the food itself. Cook has prepared a lovely spread of toast, eggs and kippers, but the actual process of eating while corseted is miserable. Your compressed stomach can only handle small bites, and even those sit uncomfortably. Your husband barely notices your discomfort. He's hidden behind his newspaper, occasionally making comments about politics or business that require no real response from you. This is probably a blessing. At least you don't have to make conversation while struggling to breathe. I'll be at the club until late, he announces, folding his paper. The Hendersons are coming for dinner tomorrow, so make sure you look presentable. The way his eyes flicker to your face makes his meaning clear. The Hendersons are influential, and Mrs. Henderson is known for her flawless complexion and fashionable appearance. You'll need to do better than just a corset tomorrow. After he leaves, you return to your dressing room where Agnes has laid out your beauty regimen. The array of bottles, pots and tools looks more like a chemist's laboratory than cosmetics. Shall we begin with the face treatments, Ma'am? Agnes asks. You nod, settling onto the stool before your vanity mirror. The woman who stares back at you is pale, not the fashionable porcelain pallor, but the sickly pallor of someone who rarely sees the sun. Dark circles rim your eyes from another night of uncomfortable sleep in your corset. Mrs. Henderson uses that new face cream, you muse. The one with... what is it called? Ammonia, ma'am, Agnes says, reaching for a white jar. Said to remove impurities from the skin. She unscrews the lid and the sharp, acrid smell makes your eyes water immediately. Inside is a white paste that supposedly bleaches the skin to the desired marble-like perfection. Are you sure this is safe? You ask, wrinkling your nose. Agnes hesitates. Lady Caroline swears by it, though her lady's maid told me in confidence that it burned her skin something awful the first week. And the alternative is... Agnes gestures to the array of other options, creams containing lead, mercury or arsenic, all guaranteed to create that coveted deathly pallor that signifies you've never had to work outside in the sun. You know, Agnes says quietly, my grandmother used to make a face cream from beeswax and rosewater. Didn't turn you white as a ghost, but it kept her skin nice into old age. You consider this. A natural option sounds appealing, but would it be enough? Society doesn't want nice skin. It wants unnaturally pale, artificially perfect skin, the kind that shows you can afford to poison yourself slowly in the name of beauty. Let's try the ammonia cream, you decide, mentally preparing for the burn, but not too much. Agnes nods and dips her fingers into the jar, then begins applying the cream to your face in light circular motions. The burning sensation is immediate, a chemical fire across your skin. Your eyes water and your nose runs, but you force yourself to remain still. "It's working, Ma'am," Agnes says encouragingly. "Your skin is already turning whiter." "Probably because all the blood is retreating in terror," you mutter, which makes Agnes stifle a laugh. Next comes the powder, a fine white dust that Agnes applies with a large puff. It contains bismuth, a heavy metal that gives that desired matte finish. You try not to think about how it's slowly absorbing into your skin day after day, year after year. "Now for your eyes, ma'am." Agnes reaches for a small dropper bottle containing a clear liquid. "Is that the—" "Belladonna, yes ma'am, for brightening the eyes." You've used it before, drops made from deadly nightshade that dilate the pupils dramatically, creating a doe-eyed, luminous look that men find attractive. The side effects include blurred vision, sensitivity to light, and if used too frequently, blindness. But what's a little vision damage in the pursuit of beauty? "Just one drop in each eye," you instruct, tilting your head back. Agnes carefully administers the drops. The familiar burning sensation follows, then the strange feeling of your pupils expanding beyond their natural size, letting in too much light. The world becomes slightly fuzzy around the edges. "Beautiful," Agnes murmurs, "like starlit pools." You blink rapidly, trying to clear your vision. This temporary beauty will make reading impossible for at least 3 hours, and you'll need to avoid bright windows. A small price to pay, you're told. "Remember what happened to Lady Pembroke?" you ask Agnes as she prepares the rouge pot. "They say she went completely blind from belladonna drops." "I heard it was her own fault," Agnes replies, repeating the gossip of the servants' quarters, using them 3 times a day instead of once. You wonder what drove Lady Pembroke to such extremes. Was her husband particularly demanding? Did she feel the constant pressure to be more beautiful, more perfect, more doll-like for the male gaze? Or was she simply caught in the same beauty trap as all of you, competing in an endless game where the rules were written by men and the players were all women? "Now for your lips, ma'am." Agnes takes a small brush and dips it into a pot of red salve. This, at least, is relatively harmless, just beeswax tinted with carmine from crushed beetles. The irony isn't lost on you. The one beauty product that won't slowly poison you is made from insects. "Agnes," you say suddenly as she applies the tint to your lips. "Do you think our daughters will still be doing all this 20, 30 years from now?" Agnes pauses, brush in hand. "Hard to say, ma'am. My mother wore a corset even tighter than yours. Said in her day they'd lace until someone fainted, then loosen it just enough to wake them up." "That's horrible." "That was fashion," Agnes shrugs. "Though I did hear about some ladies starting a society against it all. The Rational something or other." "Rational Dress Society," you supply, thinking of the pamphlet hidden in your desk drawer. Agnes nods. "My cousin works for a lady who's joined it. Says they want women in shorter skirts and looser bodices. Some even wear trousers underneath like men. The idea is both scandalous and thrilling. To move freely, to breathe fully, to exist in your body, rather than being packaged in it. What do you think would happen, you ask, genuinely curious, if I just didn't wear a corset one day? Agnes looks genuinely alarmed. "Oh, ma'am, you couldn't. Your husband would notice straight away. And if you went out, why, everyone would talk. But what if all women decided at once they couldn't ostracize all of us? I suppose not, Mom, but who'd be the first? That's the problem, isn't it? Someone has to go first. Someone has to brave the ridicule, the social suicide of defying convention. And despite your private rebellious thoughts, you know it won't be you. Not today, anyway. Now for your hair, Ma'am, Agnes says, changing the subject. She picks up the curling tongs that have been heating by the fire. They're red hot, designed to create the tight ringlets currently in fashion. Your scalp still bears small scars from previous burns, an occupational hazard of Victorian hairstyling. Agnes is skilled, but accidents happen, especially when working with tools literally designed to burn. Have you heard about that new permanent waving machine? Agnes asks as she carefully wraps a strand of your hair around the hot metal. They say it can curl your hair for weeks, not just days. The Nestler machine? I read about it. Didn't the inventor burn his wife's hair off twice while perfecting it? That's what I heard, Agnes confirms with a slight smile. Must have been quite devoted to him to let him try a third time. You share a laugh at this, a rare moment of feminine solidarity across class lines. Both of you understand the painful absurdity of what women endure. The smell of singed hair fills the room as Agnes continues her work. It's not burning, just cooking slightly. Another unpleasant aspect of beauty that everyone pretends not to notice. Your friend Elizabeth visited Paris last season and returned with tales of women who coloured their hair with dyes containing lead, mercury and silver nitrate. Some had developed strange symptoms, trembling hands, headaches, even partial paralysis, but their hair was fashionably coloured, so many considered it a reasonable trade. Did you see Mrs. Whitmore at the Johnsons' dinner? Agnes asks as she works. Her new lady's maid used to work for an actress. Did her hair with something special. It did look unusually red, you recall. Very striking. Apparently it's henna mixed with something else. Can't recall the name, but her maid said it's turning Mrs. Whitmore's hair brittle as straw. Coming out in handfuls it is. You wince, not just from the hot curling tongs near your ear. Is there anything we do that doesn't eventually harm us? Agnes considers this seriously. Sleep, perhaps, though my mother always slept in papillotes to curl her hair and woke with awful headaches from the tight wrapping. With your hair finally arranged in an elaborate style that will require you to sleep sitting up to preserve it. Agnes steps back to admire her work. Perfect, ma'am. Now for the finishing touch. From a velvet-lined box, she removes your pearl earrings, heavy pendants that will drag at your earlobes all day, eventually stretching the holes until they tear, as happened to your grandmother. Beauty is pain, after all. I don't think I need the earrings today, you decide. Just visiting mother, after all. Agnes looks surprised but pleased. These small rebellions feel significant, even if they're tiny in the grand scheme of things. As Agnes helps you rise, you catch sight of yourself in the full-length mirror. The transformation is complete. You've gone from a natural human woman to a Victorian ideal. Wasp-waisted, pale-skinned, bright-eyed, with elaborate curls and artificially reddened lips. You look beautiful by the standards of your time. You also look like you're slowly killing yourself, which, in a way, you are. The door opens and your lady's maid from the neighbouring estate enters, looking distraught. Begging your pardon, ma'am, but could Agnes come quick? It's Lady Russell. She's collapsed again. Agnes looks to you for permission, which you quickly grant. What happened? You ask the maid. Her corset, ma'am. Tightened it more than usual for the garden party. Couldn't breathe proper. And when she tried to sit for tea, she just folded. Doctor's been called, but the master is in a state. You exchange a look with Agnes. This happens more often than anyone acknowledges. Women fainting from oxygen deprivation, their compressed organs simply giving up. Usually they're loosened, revived and sent right back to the same practices that caused the problem. "Tell Lady Russell I'll call tomorrow," you tell the maid. "And Agnes, perhaps bring her that pamphlet from my desk." Agnes's eyes widen slightly, but she nods. A small act of rebellion passing forbidden literature, but maybe, just maybe, if enough women start questioning these practices. After Agnes leaves, you stand alone in your dressing room, surrounded by bottles of poisons disguised as beauty aids. Your skin tingles from the ammonia cream. Your eyes struggle to focus from the belladonna. Your ribs ache from the corset. Your scalp stings from the hot tongs. All of this suffering for beauty, all of this danger for social acceptance. You think of your mother enduring these same rituals for 30 years. You think of Lady Russell, unconscious from a too tight corset. You think of the pamphlet now making its way to another potential convert to rational dress. Change comes slowly, then all at once. Perhaps you're witnessing the slow part, the quiet questioning, the private rebellions, the whispered conversations between women about whether there might be another way to exist in the world. You take a final look in the mirror. Today, you'll play by society's rules. You'll visit your mother corseted, painted and proper, but you've refused the arsenic wafers. You've skipped the heavy earrings. You've passed along dangerous literature. Small acts of rebellion, but they have to start somewhere. With careful, measured steps, the only kind possible in your restrictive clothing, you make your way downstairs to begin your day, wondering if your daughter or granddaughter might someday walk freely, breathe deeply, and exist in her body as nature intended. It seems an impossible dream, but then again, all change begins as an impossible dream. The carriage ride to your mother's home is uncomfortable. Each bump in the road jars your compressed organs, sending small shocks of pain through your abdomen. You try to sit perfectly straight, as slouching in a corset creates its own special kind of torture, the rigid boning digging into your flesh like knives. Your mother's home appears around the corner, a respectable townhouse with lace curtains visible through gleaming windows, the perfect Victorian home designed to showcase the perfect Victorian wife who maintains it. Your mother greets you in the parlour, her own waist impossibly tiny for a woman in her 50s. You wonder how many decades her organs have been compressed, reshaped, rearranged within her body. Has she ever taken a full breath? You can't remember ever seeing it. "Darling," she says, kissing your cheek, "you look acceptable, though your complexion could use some help. Have you tried those arsenic wafers I sent over?" "Not yet, mother," you reply. "I've been feeling a bit unwell." She frowns. All the more reason to use them. Nothing enhances a woman's beauty like a touch of illness. Men adore the delicate look. She leans closer. Mrs. Carrington has been taking them for months and received 3 marriage proposals for her daughters already this season. You don't mention that Mrs. Carrington's youngest daughter confided in you that she's been coughing blood recently. Beauty has its price, and in Victorian England that price is often paid in health. "I've come for your advice, actually," you say, changing the subject. "The Hendersons are coming to dinner tomorrow, and you know how particular they are." Your mother brightens immediately. If there's one thing she excels at, it's managing a proper Victorian household. "You must impress them," she says firmly. "A woman is judged by her home as much as her appearance. It reflects your capabilities as a wife." And so begins a lengthy lecture on household management, the backbone of a Victorian woman's existence. While men run the outside world, women are expected to create perfect domestic sanctuaries. This is no small task, even with servants to do the physical labour. Have, cook, prepare something impressive, but not ostentatious, your mother advises. You don't want to appear as if you're trying too hard. Perhaps the duck with cherry sauce, followed by a Charlotte Russe. You nod, mentally adding these items to your list. Maintaining the perfect balance is exhausting, impressive enough to show your husband's prosperity, but not so lavish that you appear nouveau riche or wasteful. And make sure the parlour is immaculate, she continues. Mrs. Henderson has been known to run her finger along mantelpieces when she thinks no one is looking. You suppress a sigh. I'll speak to the housekeeper. Do more than speak, darling. Inspect everything yourself. A proper mistress knows every inch of her domain. This is the expectation, that even with a full staff of servants, you will personally oversee every detail. Your role is not to do the work, but to ensure it's done perfectly. An impossible standard that keeps you constantly vigilant, constantly anxious. Remember, your mother says, the angel of the house must create a sanctuary for her husband away from the harshness of the business world. The angel of the house, that Victorian ideal of womanhood that's been drilled into you since childhood. The perfect wife who maintains a perfect home, all while appearing effortlessly beautiful, unfailingly pleasant, and eternally selfless. A domestic goddess who exists only to make others comfortable while ignoring her own discomfort. And how is Henry? Your mother asks, referring to your husband. Working hard, I assume. Very hard, you reply automatically. He's at his club this evening. Business matters. Your mother nods approvingly. As it should be, a man needs his freedom, and a wise wife never questions his absences. You think of Henry's late nights, the perfume that sometimes clings to his clothes, the lipstick stain you once found on his handkerchief. Your mother's generation would say it's simply a man's nature, something to be ignored in exchange for financial security and social standing. Now, about the dinner service, your mother continues, launching into detailed instructions about silver placement and napkin folding. By the time you leave your mother's home, your head is spinning with instructions and reminders. The weight of expectations feels even heavier than your corset and layers of clothing. Back at your own house, you find the housekeeper, Mrs. Peters, waiting for you with a worried expression. Begging your pardon, ma'am, but we've had an issue with the kitchen range. Cook says it's smoking something terrible. And so begins the real work of being the Victorian angel of the house. For the next several hours, you move from crisis to crisis. The kitchen range needs cleaning, but the chimney sweep can't come until Thursday. You'll need to find an emergency replacement before the Hendersons arrive. The parlour curtains have a small stain that everyone missed. They'll need to be taken down and cleaned immediately. The fishmonger delivered inferior quality salmon. You'll have to send someone to the market first thing tomorrow for replacements. One of the housemaids is showing signs of consumption. Do you dismiss her immediately to protect the household, or allow her to stay until she finds new employment? Each decision falls to you, not the physical labour, you have servants for that, but the mental load of managing this domestic machine, and all while looking perfectly composed, never letting anyone see you sweat beneath your layers of proper clothing. The table linens, ma'am, Mrs. Peters says, bringing you a selection. Which would you prefer for tomorrow's dinner? You examine each option carefully. This seemingly small decision could impact how the Hendersons perceive your entire household. Too ornate suggests trying to impress. Too simple implies carelessness. This one, you decide, selecting a cream damask with subtle embroidery. And the silver candlesticks, I think, but not the new ones. We don't want to appear boastful. Mrs. Peters nods approvingly. She understands the complex social calculations as well as you do. And shall I have the parlour fire lit an hour before they arrive? Mrs. Henderson is known to feel the cold. Yes, and make sure the drawing room is slightly warmer than the dining room. We want them comfortable throughout the evening. These minutiae, fire temperatures, linen choices, silver selections, consume your day. Your corseted body moves from room to room, inspecting, directing, ensuring that every detail is perfect. This is your domain, your purpose, your prison. You pause in the drawing room, suddenly light-headed. The combination of restricted breathing and constant movement is taking its toll. Spots dance before your eyes, and you reach for a chair. "Ma'am?" Mrs. Peters appears in the doorway, concerned. "Are you unwell?" "Just a moment of weakness," you assure her, though your vision is still blurry. "Perhaps I'll rest before dinner." But there's no time for rest. The household accounts need reviewing, tomorrow's menu must be finalised, and you need to write several social correspondence letters before evening. This is the hidden labour of Victorian womanhood, the constant mental and emotional work behind the facade of effortless grace. Men may mock women's leisure, but they don't see the complex machinery you maintain. In your private study, you review the household accounts with meticulous care. Every penny must be accounted for, every expenditure justified. Your husband provides an allowance for household expenses, and you're expected to work miracles with it. The butcher has raised his prices again. The coal delivery was short by nearly a bucket. One of the kitchen maids broke a teacup from the good service. Each entry requires a decision. A solution. You're essentially running a small business, but without the recognition or authority that would come with a formal business role. Instead, your success is measured by invisibility, the smooth running of a household where problems are solved before anyone notices them. "Ma'am, your lady's maid has returned from Lady Russell's. I delivered that pamphlet as you asked." "And how is Lady Russell?" "Recovered, ma'am, but shaken. The doctor advised her to loosen her stays, but her husband," Agnes pauses, then finishes diplomatically, "prefers her current silhouette. You understand the unspoken reality. Lady Russell will continue to risk her health because her husband values her appearance over her well-being. It's a bargain most of you have made." "She was most interested in the pamphlet," Agnes adds quietly. "Asked if I might bring more information next time I visit." A small victory, another potential ally in the quiet rebellion. You nod, pleased, then return to your accounts. By the time evening arrives, you've solved a dozen household crises, reviewed the entire menu for tomorrow's dinner, written 5 social letters, organised the flower arrangements, and inspected every room the Hendersons might possibly enter. All this while restricted by your corset, dress, and social expectations of proper feminine behaviour. You haven't raised your voice, shown frustration, or admitted to any physical discomfort. The perfect angel of the house, your husband returns home as you're taking a rare moment of rest in the drawing room. "The house looks acceptable," he comments, which from him is high praise. "I trust everything is prepared for tomorrow?" "Yes, of course," you reply, not mentioning the hours of work, the dozen decisions, the physical toll. "Good. The Hendersons are important connections. Mr. Henderson could be very useful to my business ventures. And there it is, the real purpose of your domestic labour. Not your comfort, not even really his, but the advancement of his social and business standing. Your home is a stage set for his ambitions, and you are both the stage manager and a principal actor." "Oh, "And Margaret," he adds casually, "wear the blue silk tomorrow. It gives you a more youthful appearance." You nod, though the blue silk requires an even tighter corset. You'll need to start lacing earlier to acclimate your body to the additional restriction. Perhaps you'll skip breakfast entirely. It's impossible to eat in that particular corset anyway. "I thought I might invite Lady Russell to tea next week," you say carefully. "She's been unwell." Your husband frowns. "I've heard concerning things about the Russells. He mentioned that she's been reading some rather inappropriate materials, feminist nonsense about rational dress or some such." Your heart beats faster. Has he somehow discovered your own interest in the movement? You keep your expression neutral. "How shocking," you murmur. "I had no idea." Best to limit your association with her, I think. We don't need those sorts of radical ideas in our household. You nod again, the perfect obedient wife, while internally calculating how you might still communicate with Lady Russell without your husband's knowledge. The ladies' charitable committee, perhaps? He never pays attention to those womanly activities. "I believe I'll retire early," you say. "Tomorrow will be quite demanding." He waves a dismissive hand already buried in his newspaper. Your domestic labours are invisible to him, both the physical toll and the mental load. He sees only the results: a well-managed home, an attractively presented wife, a social reputation that benefits his business interests. Agnes helps you prepare for bed, a process almost as involved as dressing. Each hairpin must be carefully removed to preserve tomorrow's hairstyle. Your face must be cleaned of powders and paints. Your corset finally can be loosened. The relief is immediate and almost painful in itself. Blood rushing back to compressed areas, organs shifting tentatively back toward their natural positions. You take a deep breath, your first full inhalation since morning. "Will that be all, ma'am?" Agnes asks, folding your discarded clothing. "Yes, thank you, Agnes." You pause, then add, "Could you perhaps find more of those pamphlets? Lady Russell isn't the only one who might be interested." Agnes smiles slightly. "I believe I could, ma'am. My cousin knows a lady who attends their meetings." Another small conspiracy, another tiny rebellion. Not enough to change your life today, but perhaps enough to plant seeds for tomorrow. Alone in your bed, you rub the raw marks on your ribs where the corset has dug into your flesh all day. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. The physical restrictions, the household management, the performance of perfect Victorian womanhood. But tonight, in these precious hours of relative freedom, you imagine a different world. One where women can breathe freely, move comfortably, and exist as full human beings rather than decorative angels of the house. It seems impossible, but then all change begins as an impossible dream. Morning arrives too soon. Your body aches from yesterday's constriction, but there's no time for recovery. Today brings the Henderson dinner, a social obligation that could advance your husband's business interests or damage them, depending on your performance as hostess. Agnes arrives with a cup of weak tea. All your compressed stomach can handle this early. "We'll need to start earlier with the corset today, ma'am," she reminds you. "The blue silk requires a smaller waist." You nod, dreading what's to come. The blue silk dress was made when you were younger, before 2 pregnancies had changed your body. Achieving the necessary silhouette will require extreme measures. "There's something else, ma'am," Agnes says hesitantly. "I've heard the Henderson ladies have adopted some new fashion from Paris, something called a health corset." Health corset? You're immediately interested. What makes it healthier? It's cut differently, ma'am. Supports from the shoulders rather than just squeezing the waist. Ladies say they can breathe better in it. A corset that allows breathing. What a revolutionary concept. "Do you think we could find one before tonight?" Agnes shakes her head regretfully. "Not in time, ma'am, but I've made some inquiries for the future." This small act of initiative from your lady's maid touches you. Agnes is becoming an ally in your quiet rebellion against the more dangerous aspects of fashion. Thank you, Agnes. Now let's get this torture device on, shall we? Today's corseting is worse than usual. Agnes has to brace her foot against your dressing table for leverage as she pulls the laces. You grip the bedpost so hard your knuckles turn white. I can't, you gasp at one point, spots dancing before your eyes. It's too tight. Just a bit more, ma'am, Agnes encourages. We're almost there. The final pull brings tears to your eyes. Your waist is now impossibly small, your breathing reduced to shallow pants. You feel lightheaded already, and the day has barely begun. 19 inches, Agnes announces with professional satisfaction. Smaller than last time you wore the blue silk. You try to feel proud of this achievement, as society expects. Instead, you feel dizzy and slightly nauseated. The pain will subside, Agnes assures you, though both of you know this isn't entirely true. The pain merely evolves from sharp and immediate to dull and chronic. Your body screaming its protest in whatever way it can. Once dressed, you force yourself to eat a few bites of toast, though there's hardly room in your compressed stomach. You'll need some sustenance to get through the day of preparations ahead. In the drawing room, you find your two daughters with their governess. Eleanor, 14, is already wearing a training corset, less restrictive than an adult's, but designed to gradually mould her growing body into the desired shape. Emma, just 7, still enjoys the freedom of childhood clothing, though in a few short years she too will begin the process of physical restriction. Mother, you look beautiful, Eleanor says dutifully, having already learned the expected compliments. Thank you, dear. You study your older daughter, noticing how she sits perfectly straight, never leaning back against the chair. Her training corset doesn't allow it. Already she's learning that comfort must be sacrificed for appearance. Later that morning, you visit the milliner to collect your new hat for church on Sunday. The fashionable creation sits like a small garden on your head, complete with silk flowers, stuffed birds, and decorative feathers. The latest style from Paris, the milliner assures you, adjusting the angle. The birds are particularly fine, genuine hummingbirds from South America. You study your reflection, admiring the craftsmanship while trying to ignore what it represents. Entire species of birds are being hunted to near extinction for ladies' hats. Some estimates suggest that 50 million birds are killed annually for the millinery trade. It's an environmental catastrophe disguised as fashion. And these? You point to the foot-long hat pins needed to secure this creation to your hair. Stainless steel with pearl tops, the milliner says proudly, strong enough to hold the hat in any weather. You don't mention the news story you read recently. A woman whose hatpin accidentally stabbed a man on a crowded omnibus, causing a serious injury. Some cities have begun passing ordinances limiting hatpin length or requiring protective tips, but fashion resists these safety measures. And will you be wanting the matching parasol, ma'am? The milliner asks hopefully. You decline. One dangerous fashion accessory is enough for today. Back home, preparations for the Henderson dinner are in full swing. The house smells of beeswax polish and cooking, and servants hurry about with last-minute tasks. You supervise it all while fighting the discomfort of your too-tight corset, which seems to grow worse as the day progresses. By mid-afternoon, you retreat to your bedroom for a brief rest, a necessary concession to your physical state. Lying down in a tightly laced corset is its own special form of torture, so you recline carefully on a chaise lounge, propped up by pillows. Agnes enters with a concerned expression. The mistress next door sent this over, ma'am. Thought you might want to see it. She hands you a newspaper clipping about a young woman who died after a dancing party. The coroner's report cited tight lacing as a contributing factor. Her waist had been compressed to 17 inches, causing her organs to be dangerously displaced. During the exertion of dancing, she collapsed and could not be revived. 17 inches, you murmur, thinking of the women you know who achieve even smaller measurements. And still women continue the practice. It's expected, isn't it? Agnes says simply. No one wants to be the first to stop. The door opens again, and your younger daughter Emma runs in, then stops abruptly at the sight of you in your formal dress. Mama, why do you look so different? She asks with childish directness. You smile. It's a special dress for important guests. But your middle looks wrong. Emma frowns. Are you sick? Out of the mouths of babes. You exchange glances with Agnes. How do you explain to a child that yes, you are making yourself sick, compressing your organs, restricting your breathing, risking your health, all for the sake of a silhouette deemed attractive by society? It's just fashion, darling, you say finally. When you're older, you'll understand. But you hope she won't understand. You hope that by the time Emma is grown, the fashions will have changed, that she'll never know the pain of tight lacing or the danger of lead-based face powder. Emma seems unconvinced, but accepts your answer for now. After she leaves, Agnes helps you to your feet. Time to finish dressing, ma'am. The Hendersons will arrive in 2 hours. The final preparations are torturous. Your hair must be styled elaborately, requiring you to sit perfectly still while Agnes works with hot curling tongs. Each movement sends pain through your compressed torso. Your face must be painted to achieve the fashionable pallor. Belladonna drops sting your eyes but create the desired dilated pupils. By the time you're fully dressed, you can barely breathe. The weight of your clothing, corset, petticoats, bustle, dress, comes to nearly 15 pounds, all hanging from your constricted waist. Moving requires careful calculation. Sitting must be done precisely, perching rather than truly resting. You look perfect, ma'am, Agnes assures you, standing back to admire her work. Perfect, but at what cost? Your ribs throb where the corset has shifted them. Your lungs can only partially inflate. Your internal organs are compressed into unnatural positions. Even your skin burns from the chemicals meant to whiten it. The first warning sign comes as you descend the stairs to greet your husband. A wave of dizziness hits, causing you to grip the banister. Your vision tunnels briefly, the edges going dark. Are you well? Your husband asks, noticing your pause. Just a moment of light-headedness, you assure him with a practiced smile. It's past now. He frowns slightly. You can't afford to be ill tonight. The Hendersons are crucial connections. Not concern for your health, but for the social impression you'll make. You swallow your resentment and nod agreeably. I'm perfectly fine, you lie. Just excited for the evening. The Hendersons arrive precisely on time. Mr. Henderson, a business associate of your husband, Mrs. Henderson, a social climber of renowned determination, and their 2 daughters, both of marriageable age and corseted to painful perfection. My dear, you look wonderful, Mrs. Henderson gushes, air-kissing your cheeks. That shade of blue is so becoming. As does your gown, you reply automatically. Is that the new Worth design from Paris? She preens. Indeed it is. Frederick insisted, though the cost was shocking. This is the expected exchange. Compliments, subtle boasting about expenditure, the performance of femininity, all while both of you struggle to breathe in your fashionable cages. Dinner proceeds according to rigid Victorian protocol. The men discuss business and politics. The women maintain pleasant, empty conversation about fashion, children, and household matters. The younger Henderson girl, Clara, seems particularly uncomfortable, shifting constantly in her seat. "Are you well, Miss Clara?" you ask quietly during a lull in conversation. She blushes. "Quite well, thank you. Just a new corset. Mother insisted I needed a smaller waist before the season begins." You recognize the signs, the pallor beneath her rouge, the shallow breathing, the way she barely touches her food. Clara has been laced too tightly, probably for the first time. You remember your own introduction to extreme corseting, the days of nausea and dizziness until your body surrendered to its new shape. "Perhaps some air would help," you suggest. "We could step onto the terrace for a moment." Mrs. Henderson frowns. Clara is perfectly fine, just a bit of maidenly excitement about her upcoming debut. The message is clear. No acknowledgement of physical distress is permitted. The polite fiction must be maintained. Women do not suffer for beauty. They achieve it effortlessly. As dessert is served, you notice Clara's face growing paler. Her breathing becomes more rapid, her movements more rigid, classic signs of what doctors call corset syndrome, the body rebelling against its unnatural confinement. Before you can intervene, Clara suddenly gasps, her face now ghostly white. She attempts to stand, then crumples to the floor in a dead faint. The table erupts in controlled chaos. Mrs. Henderson fusses ineffectually. Mr. Henderson looks annoyed at the interruption. Your husband signals for servants to assist. "Loosen her stays," you instruct the maids who rush to help. Quickly, Mrs. Henderson looks scandalized. "In mixed company? Surely not. Would you prefer she suffocate?" you ask sharply, your own discomfort making you less diplomatic than usual. The men retreat to the drawing room while you and Mrs. Henderson oversee Clara's recovery. Once her corset is loosened, revealing angry red welts where the boning has dug into her flesh, she begins to revive. "I'm so sorry," Clara whispers, tears of embarrassment in her eyes. "Nonsense," her mother says briskly. "Just a momentary weakness. Once you're used to proper lacing, these episodes will pass." You meet Clara's eyes and see the hopelessness there. This is her future. Years of gradual physical damage in pursuit of the ideal silhouette, just as it has been yours. When the ladies rejoin the gentlemen for coffee, Clara's corset has been retightened, though not quite to its previous extreme. She moves carefully, like someone recovering from an injury, which, in a sense, she is. "All resolved?" your husband asks pleasantly, as if a young woman hadn't just collapsed from socially mandated body modification. "Completely," Mrs. Henderson assures him, "just youthful delicacy." The rest of the evening passes without incident, though you notice Clara barely speaks. Her focus is entirely on maintaining her composure while fighting the restrictions of her clothing. As you bid the Hendersons goodbye at the end of the evening, you press a small card into Clara's hand. On it, you've written the name of a dressmaker who secretly creates less restrictive corsets, one Agnes discovered through her growing network of fashion rebels. Clara glances at it, then quickly tucks it into her glove, giving you a grateful look. Another small act of rebellion. Another potential ally in the quiet revolution. After the guests leave, your husband pronounces the evening a success. Henderson seemed impressed. "I think we can expect an invitation to partner in the new venture." You nod, too exhausted to speak much. Your body screams for release from its constraints. Every breath is a struggle. You've been corseted for nearly 14 hours now, and the physical toll is mounting. "You did well," he he adds, which from him is high praise. Though I noticed you seemed rather concerned about the Henderson girl. No need to make such a fuss over a simple fainting spell. Women are naturally delicate creatures. You bite back the response that women aren't naturally delicate at all. They're made delicate by practices like tight lacing. Instead, you smile and agree, playing your expected role until the end of the evening. Finally, blessedly, you can retreat to your bedroom. Agnes helps you undress, carefully unlacing the corset that has been your prison all day. "Oh, ma'am," she says softly, seeing the deep red grooves and bruised skin beneath. "This is worse than usual. The price of a 19-inch waist," you say with grim humour. "Help me to bed, please." As Agnes assists you, you catch sight of yourself in the mirror, your torso temporarily deformed by hours of compression, the natural curves of your body replaced by an artificial shape dictated by fashion. "Do you think it will ever change, Agnes?" you ask, wincing as you settle into bed. "This tyranny of fashion?" Agnes considers this as she prepares your nightclothes. "My grandmother wore stays all her life, but nothing like what ladies wear now. And my mother says when she was a girl, the fashions were looser. Things do change, Mom. Perhaps they'll change again." "I hope so," you murmur, thinking of your daughters, especially young Emma, still free but destined for the same constraints. For their sakes, if not for ours. Agnes extinguishes the lamps, leaving you in darkness. Your body gradually relaxes, organs slowly shifting back toward their natural positions. The relief is exquisite yet painful, like blood returning to a limb that's fallen asleep. In the darkness, you make a decision. Tomorrow, you'll write to that address Agnes found, the meeting place of the Rational Dress Society. You'll make inquiries about healthier corset designs. Small steps, perhaps, but steps nonetheless. You drift towards sleep, imagining a world where women can breathe freely, move naturally, exist comfortably in their own bodies. A world where beauty doesn't require slow self-destruction. It seems an impossible dream, particularly in this rigid Victorian society. But then, all change begins with an impossible dream. Weeks pass, each day bringing the same routine of constraint, both physical and social. But beneath the surface, small changes are brewing. Agnes has become your willing conspirator, bringing pamphlets and whispered information about the growing movement for dress reform. You've made cautious inquiries through the Ladies' Charitable Committee, finding other women who share your quiet discontent with fashion's more dangerous demands. Today, an envelope arrives addressed in unfamiliar handwriting. Your husband is at his club, so you open it without hesitation. The Rational Dress Society welcomes inquiries from ladies concerned with health and comfort in women's attire, meeting Thursday next, 3 o'clock, Mrs. Wilberforce's residence. An address in Bloomsbury follows, a respectable but progressive neighbourhood. This is it. Your first opportunity to connect directly with the movement you've been secretly following. "Agnes," you call, trying to contain your excitement. "Please check my social calendar for Thursday afternoon." Agnes appears, a knowing look in her eyes. "You're free until dinner, Mum. Shall I arrange the carriage?" "Yes, but discreetly. I'll tell my husband I'm attending the hospital charity committee." This small deception feels justified. Your husband, like most Victorian men, would never understand why his wife would want to associate with those radical women who challenge fashion's dictates. Thursday arrives with agonizing slowness. You dress more simply than usual, selecting your least restrictive corset, still uncomfortable by modern standards, but positively liberating compared to your formal stays. "How do I look?" you ask Agnes nervously. "Not too conventional, I hope, but not scandalously bohemian either." Agnes studies you with an appraising eye. "Respectable but open-minded, ma'am. Perfect for a first meeting." The journey to Bloomsbury feels like an adventure, though you're merely travelling across London. Your heart races with a combination of excitement and anxiety. What if someone recognises you? What if word gets back to your husband? What if these women are truly the dangerous radicals that society portrays them to be? Mrs. Wilberforce's home appears perfectly ordinary from the outside, a handsome townhouse with lace curtains and polished brass. No hint that inside, revolutionary ideas about women's clothing are being discussed. A maid shows you to a drawing room where about 15 women have gathered. They range in age from young debutantes to grandmothers, and in class from what appear to be shop assistants to ladies of considerable means. What unites them is a shared interest in freeing women's bodies from fashion's most dangerous demands. "Welcome," says a stately woman who introduces herself as Lady Harberton, one of the society's founders. "We're always pleased to see new faces." You murmur your name, relieved when it elicits no particular reaction. Your social circle hasn't extended to these progressive women before. "Please, sit down," Lady Harberton indicates. "We were just discussing the rational dress exhibition planned for next month." You take a seat, noticing immediately that many of the women are sitting differently than in your usual social gatherings. They lean back comfortably, they cross their legs, they move with a freedom that suggests less restrictive undergarments. "Our new friend might appreciate seeing some examples of rational dress," suggests a younger woman. "Constance, would you do the honours?" A striking woman with intelligent eyes stands and moves to a side room. She returns carrying several garments which she lays out on a table. "I'm Constance Wilde," she introduces herself, and you recognise the name with a start. The wife of Oscar Wilde, the famous writer and aesthete. These are examples of what we consider more rational alternatives to current fashion. She holds up the first item, a corset unlike any you've seen before. "This is what we call a health corset," Constance explains. "Note how it supports from the shoulders rather than compressing the waist. It allows for natural breathing and movement while still providing the structure that many women feel they need." You examine it with interest, noting the practical design. It would still shape the figure, but without the extreme compression that makes traditional corsets so dangerous. "And this," she continues, "is perhaps our most controversial item, the divided skirt." She holds up what appears at first glance to be an ordinary skirt, but upon closer examination reveals itself to be very wide-legged trousers disguised as a skirt. "For cycling, walking and general freedom of movement," Constance explains. "All the modesty of a skirt with the practicality of trousers." A murmur runs through the room. Even in this progressive gathering, the idea of women wearing anything resembling trousers is shocking to some. "I wore a similar garment to a restaurant last month," Lady Harberton says with a mischievous smile. "They refused to serve me in the ladies' dining room. Said I wasn't properly dressed, can you imagine? 15 yards of fabric covering every inch of my legs, and I was considered improperly dressed." Laughter ripples through the group. There's a camaraderie here, a shared understanding of fashion's absurdities that you've never experienced in your usual social circles. "What brings you to us today?" Lady Harberton asks you directly. "Most women find us through some personal crisis with conventional fashion." All eyes turn to you, curious but supportive. You take a deep breath, easier in your less restrictive corset, and find yourself sharing the story of Clara Henderson's fainting spell, your own daily